The world already runs on bloodlines, village loyalties, and the promise that the strongest shinobi decide everyone else's future. In Konoha, the Uchiha stand at the center of that tension, feared for their eyes and watched for the day their pride turns into rebellion. But this story does not begin with a famous name. It begins with the boy who chooses fists over fire, silence over praise, and power over permission. This is fanfics in a nutshell, and this story starts where nobody is looking, so like, share, and subscribe if you want the rise before the world learns the monster's name. On the outskirts of Konoha, the trees shake with the force of two bodies colliding again and again. Leaves burst loose, bark splits, the air itself seems to crack under the pressure. Might Guy, all thick brows and raw enthusiasm, comes flying backward through the grove before he finally digs in with both feet. He is breathing hard, his chest is burning, his body screams at him to stop. Across from him, Uchiha Ren barely looks winded. Ren stands there in a dark combat suit with layered white armor plates strapped over it, calm as if the fight means nothing. He flexes one hand, then looks at Guy with the easy expression of someone correcting a routine mistake. Guy is all fire. Ren is all stillness. That contrast makes the result sting even more. Guy bounces back anyway, because that is what he does. He declares that youth is made of hot blood and challenges Ren again on the spot. Ren refuses with complete indifference, slips on his white police mask, and says he has work. Then he tells Guy to add 3,000 push-ups because his taijutsu is still not good enough. To anyone else, that would sound arrogant. To Guy, it sounds like instruction from the only person around his age whose body feels even more impossible than his own. He accepts it instantly. He burns brighter because of it. He starts planning the push-ups before Ren is even gone. Ren leaves the grove and heads for the Konoha Military Police Force headquarters, but he is not walking into that day blind. Hidden eyes are already on him. The third Hokage sits in his office using the telescope technique to watch the Uchiha prodigy he never quite managed to shape. Hiruzen Sarutobi has watched promising Uchiha before. He likes talent he can guide. He likes danger he can define. Ren refuses both. From Hiruzen's point of view, the boy makes no sense. An Uchiha with talent like this should be polishing ninjutsu, pushing his Sharingan, stepping naturally into the system Konoha understands. Instead, Ren spends his time building a body that moves like a weapon and chose to place himself inside the military police, the one power center in the village that belongs to the Uchiha first and Konoha second. That alone makes him worth watching. And what Hiruzen still does not fully understand is that Ren's strength is not coming from the roads Konoha knows how to measure. He is not relying on chakra tricks to explode forward through the village. He is driving off the ground with pure physical control, launching himself in bursts so violent that ordinary shinobi can barely track the movement. His speed is not flashy. That makes it worse. It feels wrong in a world where most monsters advertise themselves with chakra. The men shadowing him feel that wrongness immediately. Shisui is among them. A and BU are among them. Root agents are among them too. They think they are hidden. They think they are observing. Ren senses every one of them with ease and keeps moving anyway. To him, their concealment is almost insulting. He does not bother exposing them. He files the information away and clocks in. At police headquarters, the atmosphere is sharp enough to cut skin. The war has ended, but its weight has not left the Uchiha. Fighters are back. Veterans are in the room. Pride and resentment sit beside each other in silence. Fugaku stands at the front carrying the burden of clan leadership with a face so composed it almost looks empty. Beside him is a child named Itachi, already seeing too much for his age, already letting war carve wounds into places no one can see. Ren watches all of it with the patience of someone who is always calculating. He listens as battlefield details are laid out, and one name keeps surfacing above the rest. Uchiha Shisui, the golden prodigy, the body flicker genius. The one Konoha praises because his strength is useful, and his loyalty points away from the clan whenever those two things come into conflict. Fugaku sees the problem even if he does not say it out loud. Others celebrate Shisui. Ren studies him. Then the meeting ends and the real game begins. Ren's private strength grows through a strange rhythm nobody else understands. Quiet sign-ins, quiet gains. A hidden system that keeps handing him impossible rewards as long as he stays alive long enough to collect them. He has already built himself around a Whitebeard template that changes his body into something monstrous. The name means nothing to anyone in Konoha, but the result means everything. His physique keeps climbing, his instincts keep sharpening, and the real prize still waits ahead. The power to crack the world itself. For now, what he does have is already more than enough to turn him into a problem the village cannot categorize. His observation? Haki reaches a higher tier. His armament? Haki hardens and deepens. His body grows more dangerous without changing shape. He does not rush to fuse everything at once because Ren does not need attention before he is ready. He understands a simple rule better than most adults around him. Real power is not just about how hard someone can hit. It is about when they choose to stop pretending. That rule matters because Konoha is trying to test him. Shisui finally approaches with a polished sincerity that makes him so convincing to everyone who wants to believe in him. He shows Ren notes about the Will of Fire, pages filled with noble words about rising above clan, first thinking and merging fully into Konoha. To Shisui, this is wisdom. To Ren, it is betrayal dressed in prettier clothes. He reads enough to understand the smell and hands the notebook back like it is dirty. The rejection lands harder than any insult. Shisui keeps his composure, but the warmth in him cools. Then he reveals the real purpose of the meeting. This is a Jonin assessment, ordered by the third Hokage. If Ren passes, he rises officially inside Konoha's system. If he fails, the old men in the tower keep him boxed where they want him. Shisui expects a proper training ground. Ren says here is fine, here means Hokage Rock. That answer alone feels like disrespect. It also feels like a warning. The moment the air changes, Shisui understands he has not been talking to a gifted police officer. He has been standing in front of something that has been wearing the shape of one. Pressure rolls off Ren in waves, not the overwhelming royal domination of a king yet, but enough to make hidden waters stiffen and breathe shallow. The beast is not fully awake, but everybody nearby can hear it moving in its sleep. Then the fight begins. Shisui opens with fire, fast, clean, lethal. A great dragon fire roars across the stone and tears for Ren with enough force to burn a normal Junin to ash. Ren punches straight through it. No counter jutsu, no elemental clash, no chakra explosion to explain what just happened. Just a fist in a body that hit with such absurd force that the flames rupture around him like they were built from paper instead of chakra. That single moment resets the battlefield. Shisui realizes this is not a prodigy with eccentric priorities. This is a physical monster. The two of them vanish and reappear in bursts of impossible speed. Shisui uses clones, angles, blades, feints. Ren keeps answering with a style so brutally direct, it starts to terrify the people watching. Finger strikes like bullets, steps that break distance instantly, punches that slam into the air hard enough to create shockwaves. Even when Shisui gets steel against him, Ren meets the blade with blackened fists and turns the collision into a statement. He is not just surviving the elite of the Uchiha, he is pushing him. High above the village, the Hokage's expression darkens. He wanted information, he wanted a measure. Instead, he is watching the monument to Konoha's founding begin to crack under the force of two children from the clan he least wants growing beyond control. Danzō looks on with colder interest. To him, Ren is still only a body. Bodies can be broken, stolen, or redirected. He is more interested in Shisui's eyes. Below, the village begins to notice. The sound of stone breaking on Hokage Rock travels quickly. ANBU move. Police move. Clan shinobi move. Civilians look up. In a matter of moments, the private test becomes a public spectacle, and that changes everything. Because now, every exchange writes itself into village memory. Guy arrives with Kakashi. Kurenai comes. Yagao comes. Others gather in clusters, trading names and whispers as they try to understand what exactly they are seeing. Most know Shisui. Few know Ren. That changes by the second. At first, the crowd assumes the result is obvious. Shisui is famous. Ren is quiet. Quiet people are rarely believed until they break something large enough that everyone has to notice. An ANBU voice cuts through the confusion and confirms the unbelievable truth. Ren has not been using ninjutsu. He has been fighting mainly with taijutsu. That hits the crowd like a second shockwave. An 11-year-old Uchiha is taking on Shisui with his body alone, not with clan eyes, not with famous fire techniques, not with some new bloodline. With pure close combat. Guy almost glows with vindication. Kakashi, who has been moving through grief like a ghost, finally shows a flicker of interest. Even he cannot ignore what he is witnessing. Because this is not ordinary talent. This is somebody breaking the shape of what talent is supposed to look like. Shisui feels the crowd shift too, and that makes him decide to end it. He unleashes the speed that made his name feared in war. His body flicker floods the field with after images so perfect even trained eyes struggle to find the real one. To most shinobi below, it feels like the fight is already over. Ren praises the technique for exactly one breath, then tears through the illusion with the same terrifying certainty he has shown all day. He tracks the real Shisui. He intercepts. He keeps turning every display of genius into another chance to remind the village that bodies can become more frightening than bloodlines if someone is ruthless enough to build them that way. This is the point where spectators stop underestimating him. This is also the point where Shisui stops holding back. The Mangekyo Sharingan appears, and the world seems to tighten around it. For many below, this is their first time seeing the legendary eye in person. For some, that alone feels historic. Then Susanoo rises, green and skeletal and godlike, wrapping itself around Shisui in a monstrous shell of protection and power. The pressure of it sweeps across the monument. People flinch. Some feel awe. Some feel fear. Most assume the fight is done. The verdict spreads instantly through the crowd. Ren did well. Ren proved himself. But Susanoo is the wall no taijutsu specialist should ever cross. In the Hokage office, the conversation turns colder. Danzō's hunger for Shisui's eye sharpens. Hiruzen warns him off, but the warning changes nothing essential. Men like Danzō do not stop wanting dangerous things because someone tells them to. On the monument, Ren's mood changes in a different direction. He becomes sharper, more alert, because he knows the eye hidden behind all this power is not just impressive, it is treacherous. Kodowa Matsukami is not something to underestimate. If his instincts tell him the battle shifts into that territory, he is ready to tear the whole scene open. Shisui speaks from inside the giant as if delivering a final lesson. Ren has talent. Ren has power. But power without the right ideals, power without obedience, power without the will of fire, has to be corrected. Ren does not answer with philosophy. He answers by stepping in and hitting Susanoo. The impact detonates over the village. This is the moment the story stops being rumor and becomes legend. Ren's bare fist crashes into the giant's knuckles, and the collision makes Konoha itself feel the tremor. People stare upward in stunned silence. The impossible is no longer theoretical. This boy is trading blows with Susanoo. Then it gets worse for everyone who still wants easy explanations. The black force coating Ren's fist changes. It does not only harden, it penetrates, it invades. It tears at Susanoo from inside, rupturing the structure with a kind of violence Shisui cannot name. It is not chakra in any form he recognizes. That ignorance unsettles him more than the pain. Stone fractures spread farther across the monument. Another face of the Hokage line begins to give way. The symbolism is almost too sharp. Konoha's proud history is cracking while two Uchiha boys stand on top of it and decide the future with force. That is when Ren rises into the air itself. He steps on empty sky, as if gravity has become a suggestion. Gasps ripple through the village. Shisui hovers inside Susanoo, bleeding strain through the Mangekyo. Ren faces him at eye level, calm, excited, and more dangerous now that the fight has reached this point than he was at the start. Mid-roll. And this is where the story changes for good, because the village thinks it is watching a promotion test when it is really witnessing the first public fracture in Konoha's balance of power. Shisui realizes the same thing. If this keeps going, somebody loses more than face. Somebody loses control. Ren, for his part, looks like he could keep climbing. He even enjoys it. The possibility flickers in him that if he ever awakens a Susanoo of his own, the thing will be monstrous beyond reason. But he does not need that today. He pulls back, not because he is weaker, not because he has accepted Shisui's worldview. He stops because he has seen enough and shown enough. The point has been made. Konoha wanted to assess him. Konoha now has its answer. Shisui has no choice but to release the Mangekyo. Blood runs from his eyes. Crows sweep in and clean the evidence in one of those eerie little moments that makes him seem even more mythic to everyone except Ren. Ren sees something sadder. A prodigy so completely bent by the village's ideology that even his brilliance now serves people who will never truly trust him. The crowd erupts once the danger passes. They talk all at once. Susanoo, taijutsu, 11 years old, monster, genius, Uchiha, elite. Words pile on top of words because nobody quite knows how to process what they just saw. Guy is ecstatic. Kakashi stands quietly, and something in him begins to move again after too much time spent in darkness. Kurenai and Yigao cannot hide the way their relief turns warm when they look at Ren. Around them, the village updates itself in real time. The quiet Uchiha boy no longer exists. In his place stands a figure everyone will remember. The promotion comes the next day, and it lands with all the subtle poison Hiruzen can hide inside a reward. Ren is not merely made Jonin, he is pushed straight to elite Jonin. On the surface, that sounds like recognition. Underneath, it is also a way to define him for others, to turn him into a special case, to frame his rise through taijutsu as an oddity rather than a threat to the village's current order. It does not work. The civilians react with amazement and relief. Another monster exists on Konoha's side. The great clans react with discomfort. A new Uchiha force has emerged, and he is not easy to read. Within the Uchiha, however, the reaction is simpler. Ren's value has become undeniable. Whatever he becomes next, he becomes it, carrying the clan name. Elsewhere, in the uglier corners of Konoha's power structure, other men begin making their own moves. Orochimaru presses Danzō for live human experimentation. Danzō worries about the coming fight over the title of 4th Hokage and the village's shifting center of gravity. Ambition, fear, and cruelty keep moving behind official walls. Ren's rise is not the only dangerous thing in Konoha. It is just the one people can see. And Ren himself keeps moving with that same quiet certainty. He has no interest in applause, no interest in the village's approval. His gains are still incomplete. The Whitebeard template is not fully unlocked. The greater power is still waiting. The world still has not seen what happens when his fists stop being the strongest thing about him. For now, Konoha only knows one truth. Uchiha Ren is no longer someone to monitor politely from a distance. He has stepped into the open, and even Shisui cannot push him back into a box. That should be enough to let the village breathe for a moment. Instead, it only invites the next collision. Because while Konoha argues over titles, influence, and the future of the Uchiha, Ren's hidden path keeps advancing towards something far more catastrophic. And when the next reward finally comes, it will not just make him stronger. It will give him the kind of power that can turn fear into obedience and crack the ground beneath an entire era. Away from the village, deep inside a canyon carved out by old violence and older weather, Ren sits alone and accepts the fusion he has been waiting for. Hashirama Senju's sage body does not arrive gently. It crashes into him like a second life trying to occupy the same bones. Natural energy stirs without invitation. Chakra surges through him in quantities that would have sounded absurd only hours earlier. His muscles tighten, then settle. His breathing changes. His senses sharpen. The whole process takes time, and Konoha never sees any of it. That is part of the danger. The village only notices Ren when he breaks something in public. It never notices what he becomes in private. When the transformation finishes, even he pauses to test the difference. His old strength had already crossed into the unreasonable. Now it begins edging toward the incomprehensible. More important than that, the one area where his growth had lagged behind finally catches up. Chakra, once the only real gap in his arsenal, floods through him with a density that makes ordinary shinobi feel small by comparison. The sage body does not merely make him stronger. It rounds him out. It removes excuses. It gives him the kind of foundation monsters are built on. Then comes the second reward. Conqueror's Haki. That power does not feel like a technique. It feels like authority made physical. It settles inside him as something ancient and predatory, a force that does not ask for permission before it presses down on weaker wills. Ren understands it immediately. This is not a power for persuasion. This is a power for hierarchy, for domination, for making everyone in the room understand who is meant to stand and who is meant to kneel. He leaves the canyon only after familiarizing himself with the new pressure inside his body, and when he returns to Konoha, the village still thinks the biggest story in motion is his promotion. It is not. His promotion is already old news compared to what he can now do with a glance, a pulse of will, a simple decision to stop tolerating disrespect. The repaired faces on Hokage Rock shine under the setting sun, as if the village is trying to restore the illusion that history is stable. Ren looks at them and sees something uglier. Patch the stone all you want. The rot underneath remains. Then he heads for the Uchiha district, because his next collision is waiting there. A clan council has been called. Fugaku wants him present. That alone tells Ren everything he needs to know. His public rise has shifted the internal balance of the Uchiha. The elders who once saw him as useful muscle or a talented oddity now have to decide what exactly he is. Asset, threat, future, problem. The room is full when he enters. Clan leadership sits in ceremonial robes, old pride wrapped in old habit, and the atmosphere already stinks of politics. Fugaku remains calm at the head of the chamber. The elders are less disciplined. Some of them praise Ren's strength. Some of them try to steer it. A few begin circling the same poisonous idea in softer words. Since Ren has proven extraordinary, he should be directed toward clan interests. Since the Uchiha need stronger cohesion, he should accept oversight. Since he is young, he should show proper deference. It is the usual performance old power gives when something new enters the room. Smile first, buy next. Ren listens just long enough to know exactly who deserves his contempt. One elder in particular pushes too far. He speaks with the tone of a man who mistakes age for leverage and suggests that Ren's position exists because the clan allows it, that the elders can elevate him or contain him, that his future should pass through their hands. Ren does not raise his voice, he does not posture, he just lets the new force inside him move. The pressure slams through the room like a silent tidal wave. Several of the loudest elders lose consciousness where they sit. One moment they are speaking, the next they are folded onto the floor, eyes rolled back, wills crushed flat beneath a force they cannot see and cannot resist. The room freezes. Sharingan activate. Hands twitch toward weapons. None of it matters. The remaining elders feel the weight too. It sits on their chests. It presses against the back of their skulls. It makes even breathing feel conditional. Fugaku watches everything without interrupting. That says more than any speech could. He knows power when he sees it. He also knows the Uchiha have just passed a point of no return. Ren is not someone the clan can shepherd. He is someone the clan must choose whether to follow, fear, or provoke at its own risk. The elder who tried to posture through the pressure discovers the worst part of it. It is not just strength, it is control. Ren has not unleashed the full storm. He is only pressing hard enough to make a point. That restraint terrifies the room more than rage would have. When Ren finally withdraws the pressure, the chamber exhales like a drowning man breaking the surface. Nobody has a clever reply ready. Nobody wants one. Even the men still conscious understand the line has moved forever. Respect is no longer optional. The only question left is what Fugaku does with the truth now sitting in front of him. He does something shrewder than the elders expect. He does not scold Ren. He does not try to reclaim command through bluster. He lets the silence stand, then allows the meeting to end in a way that makes one thing clear to everyone present. Ren's strength belongs inside the Uchiha before it belongs anywhere else. That matters because the village beyond the district is shifting too. The struggle over the 4th Hokage position is nearing its end, and every ambitious man in Konoha can feel it. Orochimaru still wants the seat. Danzō still wants influence over whoever takes it. Hiruzen still wants to shape the transition while pretending he is only serving the village. But the field has narrowed. Minato Namikaze's reputation, sharpened by the war and polished by Hiruzen's quiet backing, has become too strong to deny. The announcement lands exactly where everyone expected and still unsettles everyone who wanted something else. Minato becomes the 4th Hokage. The reaction through Konoha is electric. Civilians celebrate. Young shinobi talk about a new era. Hiruzen's loyalists pretend continuity is the same as renewal. Danzō looks at the result and immediately starts calculating how to survive it. Orochimaru smiles in that thin reptilian way of his and understands what the appointment really means. He was never meant to win. Hiruzen had already decided what a safe future looked like, and Orochimaru's face did not fit it. Inside the Uchiha district, the appointment lands differently. Fugaku feels the insult beneath the ceremony. He had support, he had stature, he had bloodline weight. None of it mattered. Konoha was never going to hand the village to an Uchiha. Minato's rise confirms what many in the clan already suspect. No matter how much the Uchiha bleed for the leaf, true trust remains out of reach. Ren watches this political wound open with interest but not surprise. He never expected fairness from Konoha's system. What does interest him is the new room this creates inside the clan. Minato's elevation weakens moderates. It sharpens grievance. It makes strong internal leadership more attractive. And right now, no one in the district is stronger than him. That shift becomes visible almost immediately. The younger Uchiha look at Ren differently after the council, not just with awe, but with a hunger that borders on relief. He is proof that power can still belong to the clan without kneeling first to village approval. Even some of the elders who hate his insolence now understand they may need his presence more than they resent it. The clan has spent years shrinking itself to survive. Ren looks like the opposite of shrinking. He does not waste the opening. Training within the Uchiha district takes on a sharper edge. Men who would never have asked him for guidance before now observe his methods. Some openly seek instruction. Others circle at a distance, too proud to request anything and too curious to stay away. Ren gives little away for free, but his existence changes the atmosphere anyway. He forces the clan to imagine a different future, one where Uchiha strength is not filtered through Konoha's approval before it becomes legitimate. Asuma Sarutobi crosses paths with him during this period and tries to make a show of maintaining confidence. But even that small encounter reveals how much has changed. Once, the 3rd Hokage's son could rely on status, name, and the vague assumption that the village center would always hold. Now even he can feel that someone else has stepped onto the board with a kind of presence that makes inherited authority look flimsy. Ren does not need to humiliate Asuma directly. The gap does the work on its own. Then comes the sword. Muraka Mogiri is not just a weapon to Ren, it is a symbol that his growth has begun spilling beyond fists and pressure into tools built for catastrophic force. Whitebeard's swordsmanship settles into him with the same unnatural ease his other gifts have shown, as if another lifetime's mastery is simply unfolding inside his muscles. He trains with the blade until each swing stops looking like skill and starts looking like disaster held in human hands. To outsiders, he is an Uchiha taijutsu specialist who somehow made elite jonin at 11. That description is already outdated. He is becoming a complete engine of destruction, one who can fight barehanded, overwhelm minds, dominate space with a weapon, and now carry the chakra reserves of a sage body on top of all of it. Danzō notices the danger in his own way. He does not yet understand the full shape of Ren's growth, but he sees enough to know a future problem when one appears. Root begins taking a greater interest in him. Quiet eyes watch the district. Quiet plans form. Danzō still believes every threat can be handled the same way: isolate it, break it, or turn it into a weapon. That belief has carried him a long time. It also blinds him to the fact that Ren is rapidly moving beyond categories like recruitable, manageable, and containable. This becomes painfully obvious when Danzō's people attempt to test the edges of Uchiha patience, and Ren steps in before anyone else can smooth things over. The confrontation is brief, but the message is not. Lay hands on the Uchiha lightly if you want. Just understand that some hands get removed in return. Ren's response carries enough force, confidence, and open contempt that the root operatives retreat with their mission intact and their pride shattered. News of it spreads inside the clan faster than wildfire. For the first time in too long, many Uchiha feel something dangerously close to vindication. Obito returns to the edge of the story during this period, though almost no one in Konoha understands it yet. The masked survivor moves in the dark with his own old wounds, old grudges, and old plans. To him, Konoha is unfinished business. To Black Zetsu, Konoha is another stage in a much longer game. To Ren, Obito is not mystery. He is a future collision, an approaching shadow with a familiar shape. And still, the system keeps moving. After every political shift, every training session, every fresh sign-in, Ren's reward cycle inches forward. The anticipation around the next major gain grows sharper because he already knows what name is attached to it. Tremor. Tremor. The power Whitebeard once used to crack the world itself. He reaches the unlock point at almost the same time the village grows comfortable again. That timing feels almost cruel. Konoha calms itself whenever it thinks it understands the scale of a threat. Ren's entire existence is becoming a lesson in why that instinct will kill them. The day the power finally arrives, he does not announce it. He tests it. The first sign is almost subtle, a shift in the air, a pressure in his fist, a feeling that the world has suddenly become more fragile than it was the day before. Then he swings. The atmosphere fractures. That is the only honest way to describe it. Air does not ripple, it does not bend, it breaks. Cracks spider out through empty space as if reality itself has become glass under stress. The canyon shudders, stone walls split. The earth groans. Even Ren, who expected something enormous, pauses at the sheer violence packed into one motion. Then he smiles. Because this is it. The difference between overpowering people and reshaping battlefields. Between defeating opponents and humiliating entire systems built on the assumption that terrain, defenses, numbers, and distance still matter. The tremor power does not care about conventional shinobi logic. It turns force into disaster. It lets him hit through space. It lets him carry earthquakes in his hands. He experiments further, and each attempt confirms the same terrifying truth. Combined with his body, his haki, his sage chakra, and his swordsmanship, this power will make every future fight uglier for whoever stands opposite him. It is not just another upgrade. It is the arrival of a new category. The irony is that Konoha feels none of this directly. In the village proper, life continues. Minato wears the Hokage robe. Kushina's pregnancy progresses. Civilians settle into the illusion that one era has ended and another has begun cleanly. Uchiha tensions remain, but they still look political, not apocalyptic. Hiruzen watches from his quieter position and tells himself he can still manage the balance. Danzō keeps scheming. Orochimaru keeps sinking deeper into his own appetites. Everyone is planning for tomorrow, as if tomorrow will arrive on familiar terms. Ren knows better. Observation. Haki gives him enough awareness to feel the village as a system under strain. Too many ambitions. Too many hidden knives. Too much old bitterness with nowhere safe to go. Minato's rise does not solve anything fundamental. It only delays the next rupture. And out beyond the visible edges of Konoha's daily life, Obito is already moving toward the night that will tear the village open. Ren senses the coming change before most would even call it a possibility. Kushina's seal weakens as childbirth approaches. The Nine-Tails stirs behind bars that are about to matter less. Spatial distortions at the edge of his awareness hint at a masked intruder moving closer to the decisive moment. The atmosphere around the future grows tight. He does not panic. He prepares. That is what makes him so dangerous. Most people wait for disaster and react. Ren treats disaster like a timetable. If Obito wants to use the Nine-Tails to plunge Konoha into chaos, then Ren can use the same chaos for his own purposes. The system has already refreshed a new sign-in location tied to the beast itself. The message could not be clearer. The next great step in his ascent waits on the head of the Nine Tails. So while the village sleeps under moonlight and false security, Ren readies a white mask and sharpens his intent. He will not step in as Uchiha Ren. He will step in as something larger, stranger, and more humiliating to every force that thought it owned the night. By the time Konoha understands what kind of monster has moved through its crisis, the balance of power will already be gone. And somewhere in the dark, as Minato races toward fatherhood and Obito toward catastrophe, Ren flexes the hand that can now crack the air itself and waits for the beast to appear. Night settles over Konoha with the kind of false calm that only exists a few hours before history breaks. Lantern light burns in windows. Patrol routes hold. Families sleep under the assumption that village walls and famous names still mean safety. Inside the hidden chambers where Kushina is taken for childbirth, secrecy and barriers pile on top of one another in the old shinobi way. Protection through isolation. Security through ritual. It would almost be enough against a normal enemy. Obito is not a normal enemy. He moves through the weak points between certainty and arrogance. Masked, silent, and already carrying the conviction that this night belongs to him. The village that once buried him beneath war now sits vulnerable before him. Kushina's seal is weakening. Minato's attention is divided. The Nine Tails is close to freedom. The timing is perfect. For Obito, this is vengeance sharpened into strategy. For Ren, it is opportunity. He waits in shadow with a white mask hiding his face. Observation haki stretched across the village like an invisible net. He tracks shifting patrols. He feels the changing pulse of chakra around the childbirth site. He senses the intruder before anyone else would even know to look. That awareness does not make him rush. It makes him patient. A man who already knows where the explosion will happen never wastes himself on the first spark. Then the night tears open. The attack unfolds with brutal precision. Minato is pulled away. Kushina is breached at her weakest moment. The seal breaks under strain and malice. And when the Nine Tails finally roars free, the sound rips through Konoha like the scream of a god dragged out of chains. Buildings tremble. Civilians jerk awake in terror. Shinobi launch for rooftops before their minds fully catch up to what their bodies already know. Disaster has arrived. The village sees only the beast at first. It always begins with scale. The Nine Tails towers over walls, claws splitting earth, tails lashing the air hard enough to flatten streets. Its chakra feels endless, hateful, suffocating. This is not a rogue summon or an enemy raid. This is annihilation given shape, and then another presence moves toward it. Masked, armored, silent, not fleeing, advancing. For the first few heartbeats, no one understands what they are looking at. The giant fox has turned one section of Konoha into a storm of fire and falling stone, and one lone figure is moving directly into the pressure. To ordinary shinobi, that sight does not read as courage. It reads as madness. The Nine Tails notices him too late. Ren crosses the distance in a blur and drives a fist into the beast's skull with enough force to make the entire upper body snap sideways. The impact does not just stagger the fox. It creates a visible rupture in the air around the strike, a violent burst of white cracking pressure that sends debris upward and warps the battlefield for an instant. The beast, the tailed beast that nations treat as living apocalypse, is actually knocked off balance. The village freezes around that fact. A rooftop full of shinobi who are bracing to die simply stops moving. ANBU, in the middle of coordinating defenses, lose their words. Civilians peering out through half-collapsed windows see the impossible happen and have no category for it. Somewhere in the distance, a child will remember the image forever without understanding it until years later. The Nine Tails roars again, this time with something new mixed into the hatred. Shock, insult, rage sharpened by disbelief. It lashes out with claws large enough to split a building in one pass, and Ren meets the strike head-on. Black armament hardens over his arms. The clash sends another quake through the district. Tiles leap from rooftops. Cracks race through the ground. The beast has finally met a body it cannot casually erase. Minato arrives in flashes, trying to triage an impossible situation, and for the first time even he hesitates. The masked intruder who released the Nine Tails is one problem. The fox itself is another, and now there is a third figure in a white mask fighting the beast with bare hands and something that is definitely not normal chakra. Minato is too intelligent to waste time on confusion, but he registers the truth instantly. Someone else has entered this night with overwhelming force and their allegiance is not yet clear. Obito sees him too, and behind the mask his mood darkens. He knows strength, he knows abnormality, he knows when the script of a plan is being torn apart in real time. The white masked fighter is not supposed to be here. Worse, he is powerful enough to shift the shape of the whole disaster if left unchecked, But Obito cannot reveal everything at once. He still wants the village broken. He still wants the Nine Tails to do what it was released to do. That means letting the beast rampage a little longer, even while this unexpected monster begins pummeling it into humiliation. Ren lands another hit, this one not simply physical. The new tremor power rides his fist and detonates through the fox's body from within. The air fractures. The shockwave rolls outward in a brutal ring. The Nine Tails actually skids, tails clawing gouges into the earth as it is driven backward. The sight rewrites the emotional state of the battlefield. Fear is still present, but now awe is there too, and awe is more dangerous to old power structures than fear ever is. Fear makes people cling to authority. Awe makes them look somewhere else. The fox gathers a tailed beast bomb. Dark chakra compresses between its jaws, dense and hateful, the kind of attack that can end districts and histories together. Shinobi across the field feel despair close around their throats because they understand what happens if that sphere launches cleanly into the village core. Some brace for death, some try to move civilians. Some stare upward and realize they are too late. Ren does not permit late. He steps in, Murakamogiri in hand now, and swings. The sword, already monstrous in ordinary use, becomes catastrophic when backed by Haki, Sage-enhanced force, and a fissuring quake. The slash hits the forming bomb and the space around it seems to shatter. The sphere destabilizes before it can complete. Chakra bursts sideways in a storm of failing destruction and detonates over empty sky instead of the center of Konoha. The blast still tears apart distant treetops and rattles every building for miles, but the village survives the direct hit it should have taken. That is the moment people start to whisper names that are too big for certainty. Madara. It passes between shinobi and broken fragments, not as a conclusion but as panic, trying to make sense of overwhelming force. An Uchiha? A ghost? A masked titan strong enough to throw around the Nine Tails like this? Konoha's worst legends begin stirring in the minds of men who would rather believe in a dead devil than admit a new one has been born in their own era. Ren hears those whispers and does not correct them. The fox lunges again, maddened now, and Ren answers with a rising chain of strikes so absurdly violent they start to look less like combat and more like execution delayed for spectacle. Every impact hammers the beast's head, throat, or chest. Every impact drives it farther from the center of the village. He is not just trading blows. He is repositioning a national disaster, like a laborer dragging debris out of a street. This is when Minato finally moves to intercept Obito directly. The fourth Hokage understands that if the masked instigator remains active, nothing about the Nine Tails battle can truly be solved. Their confrontation flashes into its own lethal rhythm a short distance away, space-time ninjutsu colliding with Kamui in a duel too fast for most eyes to follow. Two masks now shape the fate of Konoha on the same night, one trying to break it, the other using its breaking to announce his existence. Kushina, wounded and weakened but not gone, feels the fox through blood and pain. She also feels something stranger. Every time the white masked fighter hits the Nine Tails, a wave of force runs through the beast that is neither ordinary chakra nor any power she recognizes from the sealing arts. Even in agony, that anomaly lodges in her memory. Tonight is not merely an attack, it is a rearrangement of who matters. The battlefield spreads. Jonin and ANBU desperately control fire lines, evacuate civilians, and try to keep the fox from doubling back into the denser parts of Konoha. Some of the Uchiha police arrive in force, and the reaction inside them is uniquely complicated. They recognize flashes of movement too disciplined, too familiar, too clan-like to be ignored. Fugaku sees enough to narrow his eyes. Shisui sees more and understands less. Itachi, still young but already terrifyingly perceptive, watches the white mask and senses something that unsettles him. The figure does not move like a servant of Konoha. He moves like someone who decided the village's greatest catastrophe would also be his stage. Ren pushes the fox again, then again, each movement timed so that its mass and rage are redirected away from the most vulnerable lines. It is not mercy driving him. He has no desire to let Konoha burn to the point where future plans become inconvenient. The village can be humbled later. Tonight it needs to survive long enough to remain useful. Obito loses his duel. Minato's timing catches the opening that matters. The flying Raijin, sharpened by a mind that refuses panic, slips through Kamui's rhythm and lands decisive damage. Obito is forced back, plan wounded if not fully destroyed. The humiliation burns. He retreats from Minato's immediate reach, but his rage does not cool. He looks once toward the white-masked figure and understands a new factor has entered the age. Someone else can stand at the level of tailed beasts and legends. That realization infects every future move he will make. With Obito's direct control interrupted, the Nine Tails becomes more primal, more chaotic, more honest. It is no longer advancing with deliberate outside guidance. It is simply trying to annihilate whatever hurts it. That makes it even more dangerous in some ways. Massive tails smash through structures, firestorms race through streets. The beast's chakra lashes out in sickening waves. Men die buying seconds. Others survive only because they were standing one building farther away than chance had any right to allow. Then Ren decides the spectacle has run long enough. He leaps high above the fox, one white mask against the sky made red by burning rooftops, and pulls his fist back. The whole battlefield seems to tense with emotion. Even those who do not understand why feel it in their bones. Something bigger is coming. He strikes downward. The tremor power crashes into the nine tails from above like a judgment no-tailed beast has ever been forced to hear. The air breaks open. The pressure wave slams the fox into the ground with enough force to crater the earth beneath it. Shock ripples outward in concentric destruction. Walls burst. Trees explode apart. Shinobi are thrown off their feet. For one terrible second, Konoha thinks it is being destroyed by the attack meant to save it. When the dust clears enough to see, the Nine Tails is on the ground, pinned by force, dazed, snarling but down. Silence does not fall completely because the village is still burning, still screaming, still alive. But a pocket of stunned stillness forms around the site anyway. The great beast, the nightmare of nations, has been beaten down in front of everyone. Ren lands on the fox's head. He does it slowly enough that everyone can see the posture. One boot on fur. White mask turned toward the village. The image brands itself into memory with the raw power of myth. It is not merely victory, it is dominance so complete it becomes symbolic. And then, because legends are built from timing as much as force, he speaks. I am Uchiha Madara. The words hit the battlefield like a second earthquake. Minato hears them. Hiruzen hears the report through hastily relayed sensory updates and feels ice move through his veins. Fugaku goes completely still. Shisui's thoughts fracture around the impossible claim. Civilians hear the name and panic because to them, Madara is not a man. He is a warning from history. To hear that name spoken by the figure standing over the Nine Tails makes the whole night feel cursed. Ren gives them nothing else. No explanation, no ideology, no demand. Just the name and the proof that he can make people believe it. Then the moment turns private in the ugliest way possible, because Minato and Kushina still have a child to save and a village to preserve. The fox is not permanently solved. The seal still matters. The cost still waits. Ren withdraws from the center of the field before anyone can lock him down or follow cleanly. Observation. Haki tells him enough to map the next sequence without standing in the middle of it. Minato will choose sacrifice if pushed far enough. Kushina will choose her son over herself. The village will survive at the price of a family. He already knows the contour of canon and has no intention of breaking the outcome here. This night serves him better if history still bleeds the way it was always going to. So he becomes shadow again while others stumble into tragedy. Minato and Kushina make their final stand around Naruto. The Nine Tails, still forced into the path laid out by ceiling and desperation, lashes for the infant with a claw that carries all the hatred of a beast dragged through chains and humiliation. The parents intercept. Flesh takes what was meant for bloodline continuation. The moment is quick, the consequences are not. Minato seals the fox into his son. Kushina clings to life long enough to leave love behind in words that will matter much later. Then both are gone. Konoha wins and loses at the same time. Dawn does not arrive gently over the aftermath. It crawls across ruins, smoke, and exhausted people who have survived too much in too few hours. Entire sections of the village are damaged. Casualty lists begin taking shape. A and BU move like ghosts. Civilians wander in shock. For every cry of relief, there is another of grief. The fourth Hokage is dead before most of the village fully understood they needed him. Kushina is gone. Their son, Naruto, lives because of a sacrifice he will spend years not understanding. And hanging over all of it is a second story no one can fully process. The Nine Tails attacked, yes. Minato died saving the village, yes. But there was also the masked figure, the one who beat the beast down. The one who declared himself Uchiha Madara. The one nobody could identify and nobody could dismiss. The political consequences begin almost immediately. Hiruzen returns to the Hokage seat because the village has no other answer ready. It is framed as duty, burden, necessity. Underneath, it is also a restoration of old hands to old power. The third will guide the village through crisis. The familiar center will hold. That is the official story. The truer story is that Konoha has just been wounded badly enough to become more paranoid, more defensive, and less willing to trust anyone even slightly outside the structure Hiruzen understands. That includes the Uchiha. Whispers spread through corridors and meetings. The fox was released by a Sharingan user. The masked man called himself Madara. The Uchiha district remains intact compared to other parts of the village. None of these things add up to proof. Together, they create suspicion, and suspicion is all men like Danzō ever need. What begins as private caution starts hardening into policy before the ashes have even cooled. The clan feels it at once. Fugaku buries his anger behind leadership, but the insult is unmistakable. Uchiha police are redirected. The district becomes more isolated. Surveillance tightens. Shisui tries to be the bridge he always believes he can be, but even he can feel how badly the tone has shifted. Itachi watches adults rearrange themselves around fear, and learns yet another lesson about how institutions choose their enemies first and justify it second. Ren watches all of this with an expression so controlled it almost reads as emptiness. Internally, he is measuring the consequences and finding them acceptable. The village has survived. Naruto lives. Minato and Kushina are dead. Hiruzen is back. The anti-Uchiha undercurrent has become visible enough to predict, and the sign-in reward tied to the Nine-Tails Knight settles into place as another step completed. His legend has also been born. Nobody says Uchiha Ren openly when discussing the masked figure, because nobody is stupid enough to accuse without certainty, and because certainty is impossible. But they say other things: monster, Madara, white mask, beastbreaker, demon, savior, threat. The uncertainty helps him. Fear is always easier to cultivate when people cannot pin down where it lives. Naruto, meanwhile, enters a life shaped by absence before he has words for it. The orphanage becomes his world. Cold looks begin early. The village's gratitude for survival does not extend cleanly to the container of the beast that almost destroyed them. Ren sees the boy from a distance once in those first terrible days, wrapped in neglect he cannot understand, and recognizes the long fuse already burning toward the future. This child will matter. Not today. Not yet. But fate has not finished writing him. The old men of Konoha think time is on their side again, that the immediate crisis has passed, that fear can be organized into policy, and policy can preserve control. They do not see what Ren sees. The village is not stabilizing, it is curdling. The Uchiha are being pushed. Danzō smells weakness and opportunity. Hiruzen mistakes temporary calm for moral legitimacy. Obito is still alive. Nagato still exists. The world beyond the leaf has not grown gentler simply because Minato died a hero, and Ren's sign-in cycle is approaching its next major threshold. He leaves the central ruins before sunrise fully breaks and returns to training with the same cold focus he had before the disaster, only now everything around him is sharper. The village has finally entered the part of the story where its own choices begin manufacturing the catastrophe it fears. Ren has no intention of stopping that process. He only intends to stand above it when it detonates. Because the next phase will not be about proving he can fight a tailed beast. He has already done that. The next phase will be about deciding what happens when Konoha's fear of the Uchiha turns from whisper to policy, from policy to conspiracy, and from conspiracy to blood. And as smoke rises over a grieving village, the boy who called himself Madara walks back into the coming years knowing that the true massacre has not been prevented. It has only been delayed until the clan, the village, and the men who think they control both finally make the mistake of cornering him. Time passes in Konoha the way it always does after a disaster. Not cleanly, not honestly. It moves forward while pretending it has healed. Buildings are repaired, streets reopen, memorials are spoken over, new routines are built on top of old grief. But underneath all of that visible recovery, the village becomes harder, narrower, and meaner. Minato's death leaves a hole in leadership that Hiruzen fills with familiar gentleness on the surface and familiar cowardice underneath. Danzō fills the darker half of that gap in his own way. He feeds fear, he shapes suspicion, he gives the village a target that can absorb the anxiety of surviving the Nine Tails. The Uchiha become that target. It begins with distance. The clan is pushed farther from the emotional center of the village, even while still being physically part of it. Their police authority becomes a justification for mistrust. Their Sharingan becomes proof of potential treason in the minds of men already looking for confirmation. Every conversation about security starts bending toward the same poisonous conclusion. If the Nine-Tails was controlled by the eyes of an Uchiha, then the Uchiha must now be watched like a loaded blade left too close to a child. Ren sees the process clearly because he has never needed Konoha's moral self-image to believe in its cruelty. He watches checkpoints tighten around the district. He watches root eyes pass too often near clan routes. He watches ordinary villagers look at Uchiha crests with a little more hesitation than before. None of it surprises him. Men like Hiruzen and Danzō are different only in tone. One wraps control in soft language, the other in hard necessity. Both are more comfortable with the Uchiha under suspicion than the Uchiha standing proud. The district responds the way wounded pride always responds. It closes in on itself. Meetings become more frequent. Tempers run hotter. Fugaku carries the burden of leadership in a silence that grows heavier every year. Some clan members demand a firmer stance against the village. Others still argue for restraint, for political patience, for proving loyalty a little longer in the desperate hope that the village will eventually recognize it. Ren listens to all of them and hears the same fatal flaw. They still think Konoha's judgment is something worth earning. His own growth does not slow during these years. It becomes more frightening because it no longer needs spectacle to be real. The Whitebeard template keeps unfolding through him, layer by layer, turning his body into something that no shinobi system was designed to classify. His haki deepens. Observation sharpens until he can sense malice, intent, and hidden movement through walls, across streets, beyond normal perception. Armament stops feeling like a coating and starts feeling like a law he can lay over the world. Conqueror's haki becomes more obedient, more precise, more devastating. He can now choose whether to flatten the crowd, isolate a handful of weak wills, or simply make a room feel the approach of something superior. The Tremor power grows most dangerously of all. Each month with it teaches him new ways to break distance, structure, and certainty itself. At the same time, his eyes finally change. The Mangekyo Sharingan awakens not as an emotional collapse, but as an inevitability. Another weapon arriving because the story around him has become violent enough to demand it. The village has always treated the Uchiha Eye as a sacred inheritance wrapped in tragedy. Ren receives his with no reverence. He values it only for utility. If an eye can control, perceive, burn, or dominate, then it belongs in the same category as a fist, a blade, or a shockwave. Useful, dangerous, replaceable if necessary. That coldness is part of what makes him so hard to predict. Other Uchiha carry legacy in their eyes. Ren carries intention. Years go by. Naruto grows from orphaned infant into lonely child. Then from lonely child into a louder, rougher version of himself. The village's contempt wraps around him early. Ren notices the shape of the boy's development from afar. Hunger for attention. Defiance as armor. Stupidity as camouflage for pain. No one with real power in Konoha chooses to solve the problem because the problem is useful. A hated container makes a convenient social drain. Naruto becomes the place where fear goes when the village is too ashamed to call it fear. Sasuke grows too, but in a different atmosphere. He is adored inside the clan, sharpened by expectation, and still kept in the shadow of Itachi, who becomes Konoha's golden contradiction. A prodigy of impossible talent and impossible obedience, Itachi walks like someone already carrying a sentence no one else has heard yet. Shisui remains brilliant, earnest, and doomed in the way only the purest loyalists can be doomed. He continues trying to bridge a gap that men like Danzō are actively widening beneath his feet. Ren watches them both with a cold understanding that neither fully earns. Shisui is strong enough to be feared, and obedient enough to be used. Itachi is intelligent enough to see rot, and moral enough to imagine he can contain it without becoming part of it. Konoha loves those types. They make excellent tools right up until the day they break. The anti-Uchiha policy hardens slowly enough that outsiders can pretend it is not policy at all. Surveillance becomes normal, relocation becomes security, exclusion becomes caution. Danzō feeds reports upward and sideways, always shaping the interpretation, always making fear sound prudent. Hiruzen objects here and there, but his objections never sever the root. He allows ugly things to continue as long as they wear the mask of temporary necessity. That is how cowardice survives long enough to call itself balance. Then the next threshold arrives. Ren completes the climb to eternal Mangekyo. It happens through the logic of his hidden system, rather than the old Uchiha path of mutual mutilation. And that difference matters. He does not pay for his eyes with love ripped out of him. He does not crawl to power through sentimental ruin. He ascends because the story has already committed to making him monstrous. When the eternal Mangekyo settles in, clarity replaces strain, vision expands, power stabilizes. Whatever drawback ordinary Uchiha accept as the price of greatness, Ren steps around it like a man ignoring a broken stair. He tests the eyes in secret, and even he has to pause at what they imply. Susanoo will come when he wants it. Genjutsu deepens. Visual precision reaches another level. Combined with everything else he already possesses, the eternal Mangekyo does not make him stronger in a simple linear way. It makes his entire arsenal more coherent, more layered, more unfair. And that is exactly when Konoha's old men begin deciding that the Uchiha issue requires a final solution. The meeting takes place behind walls meant to preserve the illusion of legality. Hiruzen, Danzō, Homura, Koharu. They dress blood and language as institutions always do. Public safety, preventative action, unrest containment, inevitable clash, civilian risk. They talk around the truth because speaking it plainly would expose what they are. The truth is simpler. They fear a clan they cannot fully control, and fear has matured into extermination. Fugaku already knows the village is preparing something ugly. Shisui senses it too, though he still wants to believe that if the right people say the right things at the right time, slaughter can be delayed. Itachi hears enough to begin splitting himself in half. Clan or village, father or peace, blood or duty. He is being pushed toward a choice designed by older cowards who do not intend to pay for the consequences themselves. Ren pays attention to all of it and feels something close to anticipation. Not because he wants his clan killed, he does not, but because he has long understood that Konoha would eventually reveal its truest face. Once it does, every mask after that becomes easier to rip off. The village has already spent years manufacturing the conditions for betrayal and then pretending shock when betrayal becomes plausible. Now it is nearing the point where even the moderate Uchiha will understand there is no reconciliation left to preserve. Shisui makes his move before the cliff fully gives way. He has Kotoa Matsukami. He has the idealism to think a single decisive genjutsu can bend catastrophe back toward peace. And he has the tragic flaw of every noble fool in a rotten system. He still believes saving the village and saving justice are the same task. He meets with Itachi in secret and speaks about stopping the coup before it begins. Not the discrimination, not the political strangulation, not the years of engineered mistrust. The coup, the Uchiha response, the symptom. That is how deeply Konoha has already colonized his thinking. He sees the village's violence as tragedy and the clan's answer to it as danger. Ren becomes aware of Shisui's movements well before the ambush. Observation. Haki reads the disturbance in the pattern. Root agents shift. Intent darkens. Danzō's greed reaches a point where even silence feels sharp. Ren could intervene early. He chooses not to. Not yet. Some truths are easier for others to accept once they arrive dripping blood. The attack happens near the river. Danzō's root spring. The trap with mechanical efficiency. They have numbers. They have timing. Most of all, they have the certainty that men like Shisui are easiest to wound because they never fully expect depravity from the village they are trying to save. That certainty proves correct. The fight is vicious but short by Shisui's standards. Root are not his equals, but quantity and preparation by the opening Danzō wants. The old scavenger steps in at the right moment and takes what he has coveted. An eye torn for control. A power stolen because he cannot create greatness himself and cannot allow others to keep it. Shisui escapes the immediate kill box, but not cleanly. Blood loss, shock, one eye gone, trust gone with it. Itachi finds him wounded and staggering under moonlight, and in that moment something inside the younger prodigy begins to rupture. Shisui, the model of impossible grace and impossible loyalty, has finally been taught the lesson Ren understood years ago. Konoha will use your devotion right up until it becomes convenient to carve you open. Shisui's final request to Itachi comes from a heart still chained to the same ideals that destroyed him. Protect the village. Protect the name of the clan as best you can. Carry the burden. The words are noble. The effect is catastrophic. They do not free Itachi. They chain him tighter. Then Shisui dies. Whether by his own last choice or by a final surrender to the river and the logic of a village that already consumed him, the result is the same. The body falls out of the world. The legend becomes a memorial. And for the few who understand what really happened, the death is not sad in the ordinary sense. It is infuriating. A prodigy wasted not by enemy brilliance, but by institutional rot and the appetite of old parasites. Ren stands apart when news spreads through the Uchiha district. The clan feels the loss as both grief and omen. If Shisui is dead, then one of the last threads connecting the clan to Konoha's center has been cut. If Shisui was killed, then the village has moved from suspicion to predation. Nobody says all of it aloud at first, but the meaning moves through the district faster than language can keep up. Fugaku calls another meeting, and this one carries none of the old illusion. Men sit in anger, not confusion. Women speak in tones sharpened by fear for their families. Itachi attends under a weight that almost breaks the room around him. Ren arrives and immediately understands the atmosphere has changed from grievance to pre-war. The coup is no longer abstract. It is operational. Roots, timing, target structures, control points, political leverage after the initial strike. The Uchiha begin discussing survival in the only language Konoha's leadership left available to them. Some still hesitate. Some still want a narrower response. But the center of gravity has moved. Men who can lose everything are often calmer than men who still think compromise can save them. The room feels like that kind of calm. Then Fugaku speaks directly to Ren. It is not a request for obedience. It is a recognition of reality. Fugaku knows the clan's chances with Ren are radically different from the clan's chances without him. He does not attempt to command. He asks whether Ren will stand with the Uchiha if Konoha forces the final choice. The answer comes without ceremony. Yes. That single word does more to settle the room than a dozen speeches could have done. Not because everyone trusts the future. They do not. But because they finally know that if blood comes, the strongest weapon in the clan will not be aimed at them. Itachi hears the answer and feels another fracture open in himself. For years he has lived between worlds, trying to believe he could preserve both. Now even that fantasy begins to collapse. The clan is moving, the village is plotting, Shisui is dead, Ren has chosen. Every road from this point leads through corpses. Danzō, meanwhile, decides that the timeline has accelerated enough to justify direct execution of the extermination plan. He pushes harder on Hiruzen. He sharpens pressure on Itachi. He continues painting the same picture until the old man can no longer pretend not to see it. The Uchiha are preparing rebellion. Action is needed. Delay means civil war. Civil war means foreign invasion. Every manipulator's argument is built from a truth bent just enough to become a weapon. Hiruzen resists in language and yields in structure. He talks peace while preserving the men and mechanisms that make peace impossible. He never stops Danzō cleanly. He never dismantles Root. He never publicly restores trust. He wants the moral comfort of opposing atrocity without doing the ugly work required to prevent it. History is full of men like that. They always leave the killing to someone else and still expect to be remembered kindly. Ren has no such illusions, and that is why Danzō finally miscalculates. The old Warhawk believes he still has room to maneuver, still has time to direct the board through Itachi and Root. He believes Ren, for all his power, is still bounded by clan politics and village timing. He has not yet grasped the central truth of Ren's existence. Ren does not wait for permission from narratives other men are still trying to manage. The night he moves alone. Root compounds are built to disappear inside the village. Underground routes, false walls, silent entries, secret personnel. It is all very impressive until someone arrives who can sense everyone inside before stepping through the first door. Observation: Haki maps the place. Tremor power tells him exactly how the structure will fail. Conqueror's Haki announces judgment before steel ever touches flesh. Root operatives collapse in waves before they can mount meaningful resistance. Some never even see him. Others draw weapons and discover too late that discipline is useless when terror crushes the body from within. The compound does not become a battlefield. It becomes a slaughter corridor. Danzō realizes what is happening seconds before Ren enters his chamber. For one tiny, almost respectable instant, the old man tries to regain control through rhetoric. He speaks of the village, of necessity, a burden, of preserving peace through darkness. He tries to wear patriotism over greed and call it armor. Ren walks through it like smoke. He does not debate, he does not grant the speech dignity. He knows what Danzō is. A coward who lets younger men drown in crimes he calls strategy. A thief of bloodlines. A collector of justifications. A man who turned Konoha's fear into policy and policy into graves. Danzō lunges for survival through force and hidden tricks, but none of it changes the gap. Ren's hand closes around his throat with a speed the older man cannot answer. Armament hardens. The grip becomes iron. Danzō tries to claw through seals, summon guards, buy one more second of command. He gets none. Ren lifts him off the ground and asks one question. Not about village secrets, not about the coup, not about root structures. Only this. Did you think the clan would kneel forever? Danzō cannot answer properly. Blood and panic ruin the chance. The look in his remaining eye is answer enough anyway. Yes, of course he did. Men like him always do. Ren crushes his throat. The sound is ugly, final, and smaller than the life it ends deserves. No speech, no tribunal, no last confession. Just death delivered with the same cold certainty. Danzō spent a lifetime outsourcing to others. Then Ren lets the body drop. Above ground, Konoha does not yet understand that one of its darkest pillars has just been removed. But the balance has shifted. The man who wanted the Uchiha exterminated is dead before the extermination can be completed. The plane is wounded. The village's hidden machinery is in chaos. Root, for the first time in years, feels fear directed inward. Ren leaves the compound through dust, fractured walls, and stunned silence, and the consequence arrives behind him like thunder. Because once Danzō dies, every careful delay collapses with him. Hiruzen cannot pretend anymore. Itachi cannot stay suspended between choices. The Uchiha cannot unknow what the village intended. The conflict that was being managed in whispers now rushes toward open blood. And as the news begins to spread in pieces, no one fully believes at first. One truth becomes impossible to deny. Konoha is no longer heading towards civil war. It is in the first seconds of it. The news does not travel through Konoha cleanly because nothing this large ever does. It arrives in pieces, broken across whispers, intercepted reports, missing patrols, and the strange silence of men who have seen too much and are trying to decide whether saying it aloud will make it more real. Root operatives vanish from corridors they once treated like private arteries. A and BU receive conflicting signals. The old rhythms of hidden power start stuttering under the strain. At the center of it all sits one impossible fact that no one wants to believe on first hearing. Danzō is dead. For a few precious moments, the information is treated like rumor because rumor is softer than truth. But then more fragments arrive. The underground compound is shattered. Guards are missing, unconscious, or pulped into the kind of ruin only overwhelming force could create. Seals are broken. Blood marks a path where authority used to live. And Danzō Shimura, the man who made a career out of operating beyond consequence, is no longer there to deny any of it. Hiruzen receives the report with the stillness of a man who has finally run out of places to hide his failures. Homura and Koharu stand nearby, old faces drawn tight with shock and anger. None of them says the obvious first. The obvious is too incriminating. If Danzō is dead, then the machine they allowed to grow beneath them has been penetrated. If the machine has been penetrated, then the Uchiha crisis is no longer a manageable political wound. It has become armed retaliation. Worse, it has become retaliation from someone strong enough to cut through root like wet paper. They do not know for certain that Ren did it. They know anyway. Hiruzen's pipe sits cold in his fingers. He had always told himself that the village's contradictions could be balanced. Harsh hands over here, soft words over there, public patience, private brutality, enough pressure to contain resentment, enough mercy to preserve the illusion of moral authority. Danzō made that balancing act easier because Danzō did what Hiruzen refused to touch directly. Now Danzō's corpse is the proof that all those compromises led here. The violence is no longer hidden, it has walked upstairs. Outside, the Uchiha district changes shape before dawn fully clears. The first sign is not movement. It is mood. Doors open earlier than usual. Shinobi step into the street armed, not ceremonially but honestly. Mothers call children indoors without explaining why. Men who spent years arguing about timing stop arguing and begin assigning positions. The district is not panicked. It is sharper than panic. It feels like a blade that has finally accepted it will be used. Fugaku stands at the center of that transition with eyes harder than anyone in the clan has seen in years. Danzō's death confirms what many wanted denied for as long as possible. The village intended extermination. Root intended preemptive slaughter. Shisui died because Konoha no longer viewed Uchiha brilliance as something to celebrate. It viewed it as something to steal or kill. That changes the moral mathematics for everyone. Even the hesitant fall silent. Ren moves through the district like the visible future. People look at him and stop pretending there are still peaceful exits left to negotiate. He says little. He does not need speeches. Danzō's death is already the speech. His presence confirms the rest. He has crossed the line Konoha thought only it was allowed to cross. That matters more to the clan than any appeal to pride ever could have. Itachi arrives under a sky that still has not decided whether to be mourning or aftermath. He sees the armed district, sees the faces sharpened by confirmation and betrayal, sees his father surrounded not by rabble, but by people who now believe they are standing in the last hours before either liberation or annihilation. And for the first time, the center of his illusion collapses completely. There is no saving both sides. There never was. The village spent too long preparing a grave. The clan finally noticed the measurements. Fugaku looks at his elder son, and the old private tension between them becomes part of something larger. He does not accuse Itachi of betrayal. Not yet. He does not need to. He asks a simpler, crueler question. Do you still believe they will spare us? Itachi cannot answer quickly enough. That is answer enough. Ren watches him with the same cold clarity he has always had. Itachi is brilliant, but brilliance is not immunity. He still thinks choices exist after systems have already chosen for you. He still thinks sacrifice can be clean if the intention behind it is pure. He has not yet learned the ugliest truth. Institutions never ask for one sacrifice. They ask for the first and use it to justify the next. Fugaku turns to the clan and gives the order. Mobilize. It spreads through the district like fire finally allowed oxygen. The police force fractures along the line everyone knew existed but hoped not to test. Some Uchiha still hesitate to move openly against the village, but hesitation collapses under the pressure of the moment. There will be no second warning. There will be no better night. Danzō's death has already detonated the secret part of the conflict. The only thing left is the public version. Konoha responds the way frightened authority always responds. It declares the need for stabilization. A and BU are deployed. Civilian areas are quietly told to remain inside. Patrols redirect toward key roads, gates, and command points. The official story is that an emergency security threat is being addressed. The true story is that the village is trying to decide whether it can contain the Uchiha district before the district spills its rage into the wider leaf. That becomes impossible the moment the first police unit defects in force. Uchiha insignia move through familiar streets, not as enforcers of village law, but as a clan column reclaiming its own purpose. The psychological effect hits harder than the tactical one. Konoha is used to the Uchiha as controlled power, visible but bounded, dangerous but state-aligned. Seeing them step into open resistance tears that illusion in half. Civilians lock their doors. Lesser clans scramble for clarity. Jonin, who spent years underestimating the depth of the grudge, suddenly understand that the village has been storing an internal war inside itself. The first direct clashes are brutal and brief. ANBU attempt to isolate the district perimeter and hold choke points. Sharingan answer them in the dark. Fire jutsu sweep alleys, steel flashes, bodies hit pavement. The fighting is not chaotic in the ordinary sense. Both sides are too trained for that. It is precise, murderous, and intimate. Men who nodded to each other at official meetings weeks earlier now cut for throats under the same rooftops. The civil order Konoha prides itself on begins falling apart in little contained killings. Ren does not waste himself on perimeter work. He heads for the old center. He knows exactly where the village's spine still sits. Hiruzen, Homura, Koharu. The old architecture of compromise and quiet slaughter. Konoha can absorb border losses, district violence, even a night of open fear. What it cannot absorb is the destruction of the elders in public. That is where the psychological war will be decided. Others understand enough of his intention to follow without slowing him. Fugaku moves with the bearing of a clan head who has finally stopped pretending legitimacy will protect his children. Elite Uchiha flow behind them. Even some who once argued for patience now carry themselves with the grim relief of men no longer required to humiliate themselves by waiting. They do not sneak. That is the point. Konoha hears them coming in stages. First through battlefield reports, then through tremors under the street, then through the physical sensation of pressure descending over central routes like weather with intent. Ren's Conqueror's haki rolls outward in controlled pulses, not enough to flatten every shinobi in the village, but enough to make everyone between the district and the Hokage administration understand that something far bigger than ordinary rebellion is moving through them. Chonin collapse on sight. Some Jonin freeze just long enough to die. Others brace, survive, and feel their own bodies betray the fact that fear now has weight. By the time Ren reaches the heart of Konoha, the old capital of authority no longer feels stable. It feels besieged from the inside. Hiruzen takes position with the elders near the administration complex, protected by ANBU layers and the remaining faith of a village that still wants to believe old leadership means old certainty. Homura and Koharu stand rigid beside him, too proud or too terrified to do otherwise. Hiruzen himself carries sorrow on his face because he still wants history to remember him as the man who tried to prevent this. He still wants to believe the story where he is a tragic elder, not a weak one. Ren steps into view and burns that illusion away. He does not wear the white mask now. He does not need borrowed legend. He walks bare-faced under the eyes of the village as streets fill with smoke, broken stone, and the stunned attention of survivors peering from shattered cover. The choice is deliberate. Konoha will not be allowed to hide behind uncertainty anymore. Let them see who rose from the district they isolated. Let them attach a name to the force they created. Gasps move through the watchers. Recognition lands like a slap. Uchiha Ren, the prodigy, the elite Jonin child, the quiet one, the monster from Hokage Rock. Pieces of old fear lock into place around newer fear, and suddenly the white mask rumor and the living man in front of them begin merging into one terrible possibility. Homura speaks first because old men mistake speaking first for retaining control. He calls Ren's actions treason. He calls Danzō's death proof of clan rebellion. He reaches for the word responsibility as if invoking it can reverse years of political suffocation. Ren looks at him like one might look at rot under floorboards. Then he lets the haki hit harder. It tears through the square with savage precision. Not a wave this time, a hammer. ANBU lines buckle. Shinobi drop to one knee or straight to unconsciousness. The crowd beyond the immediate cordon cries out as the pressure rakes over them without fully crushing them. Homura staggers, and Koharu's face drains of blood. Hiruzen remains standing, but only because age, experience, and sheer chakra give him enough footing to survive the first impact. That alone already ends the argument. The old center of Konoha has been made to physically feel its inferiority before the village. Responsibility? Ren asks, and his voice carries farther than it should in the broken square. You mean the kind that starts with suspicion, hides behind policy, and ends with children marked for death before they commit any crime? No one answers. There is no answer that can survive the truth of the moment. Hiruzen tries anyway. He speaks of stopping bloodshed, of preventing a coup, of Danzō acting beyond his orders. It is the last refuge of men who preserved a monster because they found him useful and now want distance from the corpse. Ren hears every word and grants none of it dignity. Fugaku arrives on the flank with armed Uchiha, and the village sees the full shape of the crisis. This is not one rogue killer. This is the clan head himself standing under open war conditions. Police insignia gleam beside battle intent. The old separation between Uchiha clan grievance and Uchiha military power is gone. The district has finally cashed in its rage. Koharu, desperate now, accuses the clan of forcing the village's hand. Her voice shakes anyway. She still thinks accusation is a shield. Homura finds a little courage in standing next to power and adds his own. The Uchiha had to be contained. The risk was too great. The Nine Tails prove the danger. The words spill faster once started because they are old justifications, rehearsed in private for years. It is enough. Ren moves. He crosses the space between them so fast that most eyes only understand the result. Homura's body lifts off the ground from the shock of the first strike, before his mind can catch up to the fact that he has been hit. The blow caves armor, ruptures ribs, and sends him flying through the stone frontage behind him in a spray of blood and masonry. Koharu barely has time to inhale before Ren turns and drives a blackened fist straight through her guard and into her torso with the kind of force that folds the rest of her sentence back down her throat forever. The square goes dead silent for a single heartbeat, then panic explodes. This is the line even Konoha's hardest men hoped would not be crossed in public. Secret killings, covert plots, vanished prisoners, manipulated reports, those things the village can survive because they live in shadow. But two elders dying under open sky, before shinobi, clan forces, and terrified civilians shatters the ceremonial surface of authority. The old regime is not merely challenged, it is humiliated in front of everyone. A and BU surge. Uchiha, answer. Fire and steel collide across the square. The battle around Ren becomes ugly instantly. Elite shinobi come at him in coordination, trying to buy Hiruzen's space, trying to salvage a command structure that is evaporating by the second. He gives them a lesson in scale. Tremor-lace punches burst through guard formations. Murakumo Giri sweeps in broad, violent arcs that split shocker-coated weapons, and the men behind them. Armament hockey blackens over him like a declaration that flesh no longer matters here. Every motion is efficient. Every kill carries meaning. This is not frenzy. It is execution applied to a system. Mid-roll, because this is the point where the village stops asking whether the Uchiha can really do it and starts realizing the old Konoha order may not survive the hour. Hiruzen steps forward at last. Whatever else he is still the professor. His chakra rises. Elemental mastery circles him with old terrifying competence. The battlefield feels him the way it once did in war years, when Hiruzen Sarutobi still looked like the kind of man history could trust with monstrous choices. He summons Enma. The staff form slams into the ground. He faces Ren with sorrow, anger, and a final bit of command left in his spine. For a second, the square holds on that image. Old Hokage. New monster. The village is past and its consequence looking directly at each other. Then Hiruzen attacks. He moves with surprising speed, staff whipping for joints, skull, and centerline, while elemental blasts chain behind the pressure. Fire tears across one side of the square. Earth rises underfoot. Shadow clones flicker into flanking positions. He fights like a man who has spent a lifetime mastering options. Ren answers like a man who has become the reason options stop mattering. The staff strikes land into armament and spark off impossible hardness. Fire is broken by raw shockwaves. Earth walls crack before they fully rise. Clones are erased in single motions so violent they seem to tear holes in the rhythm of the fight itself. Hiruzen's skill is real. So is the gap. Still, he lasts longer than most. That matters to the village watching. It gives them one last image of their leader refusing collapse. It also gives Ren the chance to show them what refusal earns when it arrives too late. The battle lifts off the square and tears across the administrative rooftops. Hiruzen uses elevation, terrain, clone overlap, every inch of mastery he has left. Ren tracks him effortlessly through observation hockey, step by step, feint by feint, reading intent before motion finishes. When Enma extends for a decisive strike, Ren catches the staff in one hand and cracks the surrounding air with the other. The tremor throws Hiruzen sideways through his own defensive angle and drives him into a rooftop hard enough to crater tile and beam together. Enma roars in warning. Hiruzen forces himself up. He should stay down. Pride, duty, guilt, whatever name he gives the reason, makes him stand again. Ren lands in front of him and speaks quietly enough that only the old man fully hears it. You let monsters grow because they were useful. Then you acted surprised when the blood reached your own door. Hiruzen's eyes harden. For the first time, the sorrow strips away and something uglier shows through. Not denial, not exactly, recognition. He knows the accusation fits. He also knows there is no confession in the world large enough to redeem the fact now. So he does what old leaders always do at the edge. He chooses the village over truth. He forms the seals. The Reaper Death Seal is coming. A few nearby shinobi recognize the beginning and go cold. If Hiruzen completes it, he may drag both himself and Ren into the grave. The cost will be absolute. The symbolism will be larger still. The old Hokage dying to stop the Uchiha devil he failed to manage. Konoha could build a century of propaganda on that ending. Ren does not allow him the luxury. Conqueror's haki slams downward with surgical brutality, not at the square, not at the whole village, but directly into Hiruzen's failing concentration. For one catastrophic instant, the old man's will buckles. It is tiny, it is enough. Ren closes the distance and drives his fist into Hiruzen's chest. The blow does not just strike, it detonates. The tremor ruptures through bone, organ, and chakra channels together. Hiruzen's body jerks. Blood bursts from his mouth. The seals die unfinished in fingers that have forgotten how to obey him. The rooftop under both of them splits open with the violence of the impact. Below, the village hears the crack and looks up. Ren lifts the dying third Hokage by the front of his robes and drags him to the broken edge where the whole square can see. Hiruzen's feet barely find ground. Blood runs down his chin. His eyes still try to focus on the village, on his people, on the shape of the authority already leaving him. This, Ren says, loud enough for the square and the streets beyond, is what your peace was made of. Then he kills him, not with a complicated technique, not with ritual. A final brutal strike through the throat and chest, delivered in full view of the shinobi, the clan, the civilians who dared look, and every institution Konoha built around the idea that public order would always mask private corruption. Hiruzen's body falls from Ren's hand and hits the ruined rooftop like the end of an era too rotten to deserve mourning. No one moves at first. The third Hokage is dead, Homura is dead, Koharu is dead. Danzō is already dead. In the space of a single morning, the entire old command spine of Konoha has been ripped out under open sky. The psychological collapse comes in waves. Some shinobi scream and charge because action is easier than understanding. Some break. Some simply stare at the bodies and feel the whole meaning of the village tilt beneath them. Uchiha fighters, seeing the impossible become fact, surge with a terrible clarity. The old people who planned their extinction are gone. For a few minutes, that truth feels almost like victory. But victory is never that simple, because Itachi finally moves. He arrives not as a son or brother or clan heir. He arrives as the contradiction Konoha spent years manufacturing. Eyes bright with unbearable intelligence and unbearable fracture, he steps into the aftermath carrying the full weight of a choice made too late and still somehow in time to make everything worse. The village sees its golden prodigy. The clan sees Fugaku's son. Ren sees exactly what he expected, a weapon forced to pick a direction and hating both options. The square notices him all at once. So does Sasuke, farther back, breath gone from shock and terror. Fugaku turns. For the first time all morning, something like true pain crosses his face. Not because the battle is lost, because he can already feel what Itachi's presence means. The last line between civil war and family slaughter has just stepped into the open. Smoke drifts across the dead elders. Hiruzen's body lies where Konoha can see it. The Uchiha stand armed in the ruins of the authority that meant to erase them. And at the center of the new silence, Itachi faces his clan while every side waits to learn whether the next heartbeat belongs to revolution, massacre, or something even more unforgivable. Then his Sharingan turns, and the future takes one step closer to blood no village will ever wash out. For a suspended instant, nobody in the square breathes correctly. Smoke drifts between broken rooftops. Hiruzen's body lies twisted in full view of the village that once called him grandfather. Homura and Koharu are dead. The administrative core of Konoha has been gutted. Uchiha shinobi stand in the ruins like survivors of a verdict they were supposed to die under, not outlive. And there, in the middle of that impossible new order, stands Itachi. His eyes are steady. That steadiness is what makes him terrifying. Ren reads him before he moves. Observation, Haki catches the fracture beneath the composure, the grief packed so tightly it has become function. The lethal narrowing of a mind that has finally stopped asking whether there is a clean answer and settled for the answer that preserves the largest number of structures still standing. Itachi has always been dangerous because he sees too much. Now he is more dangerous because he has accepted that seeing too much does not save anyone. Fugaku steps forward first. He does not raise his weapon. He does not shout. His voice, when it comes, is low and brutal in its restraint. Itachi, just that. A father's voice, a clan head's warning, a final opening. Itachi's gaze flickers to him, then to Sasuke farther back in the crowd, small and frozen, and then beyond them to the village, to civilians, to shinobi, to smoke rising over Konoha, to the shape of a civil war that has already begun. Ren sees the calculation finish behind those eyes. Itachi is not deciding between good and evil. He is deciding which horror leaves enough structure behind for Sasuke to keep breathing. That answer has never favored the clan. The first A and BU surge at exactly the wrong time, hoping to capitalize on the pause, and Itachi moves before anyone else can reinterpret his position. Fire blooms, steel flashes. The attackers die almost instantly, cut down with the kind of precision that turns hesitation into proof. For one sharp heartbeat, some of the Uchiha think he has chosen them, then he pivots. His genjutsu crashes into an armed cluster from the edge of his own clan's formation, freezing them hard enough for a follow-up strike to drop two before they can break free. Gasps ripple through the square. Itachi has made his answer public. He is not with Konoha in the sentimental sense. He is with continuity, with the village as a surviving structure, with whatever arrangement of corpses still leaves something functioning when dawn ends. Fugaku's expression does not break. That almost hurts more. So this is what they made of you, he says. There is grief there, but no surprise. Maybe that is the cruelest truth in the whole scene. Part of Fugaku always knew Konoha would eventually ask this exact thing of his eldest son. And part of him knew Itachi might actually do it. The battlefield explodes again. Uchiha rush Itachi in waves of disbelief and rage. He answers with terrifying elegance, never wasting motion, never indulging emotion in the visible mechanics of his killing. Shuriken trajectories lock into impossible chains. Fire jutsu are redirected through superior timing. Sharingan meets Sharingan in mirrored bursts of prediction and counter-prediction. He is not stronger than Ren. He is not even the strongest man currently standing in the square. But in close clan combat, against people who know him and are wounded by that knowledge, he becomes devastating. Ren does not step in immediately. Not because he is uncertain, because he is measuring. If he kills Itachi now, Sasuke's path changes. Konoha's next shape changes. Akatsuki changes. The wider script fractures in ways that might cost him useful future collisions. At the same time, letting Itachi cut too deep into the Uchiha core right now weakens the very revolution Ren has just dragged into daylight. There is no sentimental value in the choice, only consequences. Fugaku resolves the immediate problem first. Mangekyo flares in his eyes, no longer a rumor or hidden inheritance, but a reality he has preserved in secret for exactly the sort of hour the clan prayed would never arrive. The pressure shifts the moment he enters the exchange. Itachi feels it at once and breaks backward across cracked stone, father and son finally facing one another without any remaining illusion between them. Around them, the wider battle keeps spreading through Konoha. The death of the old leadership has reached every district now. Some clans barricade and wait. Some mobilize to defend the village, though few yet understand what defending it even means when the Hokage and elders are dead. The Haiga close ranks around their compound. Aburame forces begin reconnaissance and containment. Civilian panic thickens in the streets nearest the administrative core. Tronin, who would normally look upward for command, receive none. The village is not functioning as a united organism anymore. It is a collection of frightened organs trying to guess whether the body they belong to still exists. Word crosses the walls faster than even Konoha can control. Messenger hawks fly, sensory nets flare. Distant nations begin receiving pieces of the same impossible report. Internal revolt. Third Hokage, dead. Uchiha uprising. Administrative collapse. In every rival village, leaders hear those fragments and smell opportunity. Ren hears those tremors too, not through rumor but through instinct. The world outside Konoha is leaning closer. Back in the square, Fugaku and Itachi clash with a violence so emotionally compressed it feels almost silent compared to the chaos around them. Fugaku fights heavier, like a man carrying all the betrayed years of the clan in his body. Itachi fights cleaner, sadder, and somehow more ruthless because he has convinced himself that mercy now exists only at the scale of systems, never individuals. Their fire collides in midair, genjutsu pressures roll and crack, steel shrieks against steel. Sasuke watches from the edge of trauma, not fully understanding technique, only understanding the emotional truth of what his eyes are telling him. His brother is fighting their father. His village is burning. The adults who explained reality to him have all turned into strangers at once. Ren finally moves when outside pressure arrives. The first coalition strike teams are not armies, they are opportunists. Foreign infiltration cells and border scouts, already positioned near fire country for unrelated reasons, begin testing the edges the moment Konoha's instability becomes obvious. Minor incursions. Recon groups, kill teams probing whether the leaf is weak enough to bleed further. It is exactly what every internal collapse invites. That is why Ren leaves the square, not in retreat, in escalation. He launches across rooftops and out toward the advancing pressure, Conqueror's haki rolling ahead of him like the early edge of a storm. Konoha barely has time to register that its most terrifying internal force is now heading outward before the first foreign detachment meets him and learns the cost of bad timing. They never really have a battle. One pulse of haki jocks the weakest on the spot. A quake-backed punch caves the lead shinobi and the ground beneath him into the same broken crater. Murakamogiri flashes once, twice, and bodies come apart in efficient, ugly arcs. The surviving infiltrators retreat immediately, but retreat becomes information. Their last view is of a white-haired, pressureless blur. Wait, no Ren, not white-haired, need consistency. Let's correct. Their last view is of Ren standing amid split earth, village smoke behind him, looking less like a defending shinobi, and more like a natural disaster that happened to choose a side for the next few minutes. That message spreads outward faster than the first. Kumo hears it. Aiwa hears it. Kirigakure and Tsunade hear versions of it through their own lines. Konoha is in chaos, yes, but there is also a monster inside the chaos strong enough to flatten elite squads before the invasion even properly begins. That detail does not discourage everyone. It provokes something more dangerous. Curiosity, desperation, and the old shinobi instinct to attack before a rival recovers. The four great villages begin moving. Not in full declared war columns yet, but enough. Enough to make this more than an Uchiha coup. Enough to turn Konoha's internal civil fracture into a continental event. Back inside the village, Itachi and Fugaku's battle reaches its breaking point. Fugaku lands a punishing strike that sends Itachi through a wall of fractured stone and follows with killing intent for the first time. Father has become clan head fully now. If Itachi remains what Konoha shaped him into, then he must die before he kills more of his own blood. Itachi answers with Susanoo. The spectral warrior rises, red and skeletal in the smoke, and every shinobi still conscious enough to look feels the scale of the confrontation jump again. Sasuke's knees nearly give beneath him. Some Uchiha shout in disbelief, others in fury. Fugaku's face hardens. Then his own Susanoo begins to answer, darker, denser. A hidden inheritance exposed at the exact second it becomes necessary. The square becomes the center of a god war inside a civil war. Ren feels it, notes it, and keeps moving outward. That is not neglect, it is prioritization. Fugaku and Itachi now occupy each other in a conflict no third party can resolve without wasting the meaning of it. Meanwhile, the outside world is approaching. If Konoha falls to foreign hands tonight, then none of the Uchiha blood already spilled buys anything durable. So Ren takes command of the perimeter the way only he can, by making everyone else too frightened to dispute the fact. The first substantial coalition forces reach Fire Country's edge under the assumption that Konoha cannot possibly maintain coherent resistance after losing its leadership. That assumption dies on contact. Ren meets them at the broken tree line outside the village and gives them an answer so violent it stops being tactical and becomes theatrical. He does not merely strike bodies, he strikes space. A tremor punch detonates through empty air and fractures the battlefield in front of a charging formation. The ground ruptures in branching lines. Trees shear apart. Entire ranks lose their footing before any shinobi-to-shinobi contact occurs. The survivors stare at the cracked atmosphere itself and realize too late that they are not fighting within normal rules. Some try ninjutsu bombardment. He walks through portions of it, breaks the rest with quake-laced counters, and appears in their midst faster than discipline can recover. Conqueror's haki slams again. This time Ren does not bother being gentle. Men collapse in bunches. A few of the stronger jonin remain standing long enough to understand the humiliation before Murakamogiri removes them from the equation. Those who retreat do so in horror. Those who hold die, proving a point no one will remember with gratitude. By sunset, the rumor has turned into military truth. Konoha's internal revolt has produced a singular force capable of breaking elite formations alone. That makes the major villages hesitate, not stop, hesitate. And in shinobi politics, hesitation is an opening. Ren uses it. He steps onto a ridge visible to scouts from multiple fronts and lets his voice carry with hockey-backed force across the valley. "Come farther," he says. "I'll destroy your armies before you reach the gates." It is not a boast. It is a declaration of available physics. The scouts report every word. In Kumo, the Raikage's War Council reads the intelligence and cannot decide whether the report is exaggerated. In Iwa, old instincts urge aggression because Konoha wounded is too valuable to ignore. In Kiri, internal brutality meets external pragmatism and concludes that probing attacks are still worth attempting. In Suna, calculation leans toward watching the others bleed first. None of them yet fully grasps the detail that matters most. Ren is not bluffing because he does not think in military probabilities the way they do. He thinks in thresholds. Can he break enough of them fast enough that the rest decide living is smarter than pride? Yes. So the next clash becomes the answer. A larger coalition vanguard finally advances under mixed banners and mixed assumptions, some hoping Konoha's monster will be exhausted by internal war, some trusting sheer numbers, some convinced no individual shinobi can actually rewrite battle at this scale. Ren lets them come deeper into the valley. Then he shows them Whitebeard's inheritance in full spirit if not full completion. Muraku Mogiri rises. The blade comes down. The world breaks with it. The quake that follows does not stay in the neat boundaries armies prefer. Earth walls split as if mocked by geology itself. Shockwaves race through formations. Men are thrown, crushed, or simply erased beneath falling stone and bursting ground. Chakra techniques lose shape mid-cast because the terrain beneath the casters no longer agrees to exist in a stable way. Screams travel strangely through cracked air. One side of the valley caves. Trees topple in waves. Horses rear. Summons vanish. Command structure dissolves into survival instinct almost instantly. Ren lands amid the collapse and becomes the center of it. Armament coats his fists. Observation reads every desperate angle. Conqueror's hockey keeps pressing, thinning the will of men who already came in uneasy. He moves from strike to strike with the kind of terrifying calm only absolute confidence produces. A Jonin captain from Iwa tries an earthbind assassination line and is killed through his own defense. A Kumo squad attempts coordinated lightning suppression and loses all coordination. The second one of their leaders blacks out under hockey pressure. Kiri's bladesmen charge hardest and die hardest, cut down while still trying to make sense of how one man can feel larger than a battlefield. By the time the coalition rout begins, it is too late to call the engagement anything but a massacre, and Konoha sees it. Sensory shinobi, scouting A and BU, Haiga observers push to the edge of the village's safety perimeter. They all watch Ren break the external threat in real time, and the result is almost as destabilizing as the old leadership's deaths. Because now a different question takes root. If the Uchiha revolutionary is also the only reason foreign armies are not pouring into the heart of the Leaf, what exactly is Konoha supposed to call him? Traitor, savior, tyrant, shield? The categories do not hold anymore. Inside the village, the answer only gets messier. Fugaku and Itachi's battle ends not with a clean kill, but with mutual ruin. Both Susanoo forms have battered the square into a wasteland of splintered stone and scorched rooftops. Fugaku finally forces Itachi back with a savage exchange that leaves both bleeding, both breathing hard, both staring at one another through the wreckage of the family they could not preserve. Then Sasuke runs forward. It is foolish. It is human. It is enough. The single motion cracks the fatal rhythm. Fugaku sees his younger son, and the father in him reasserts itself for one catastrophic hesitation. Itachi sees Sasuke, and every monstrous compromise he has made clarifies into one point again. The boy must live. That opening is all the battle needs to transform. Neither finishes the other. They disengage in a silence more painful than any final strike could have been. Fugaku withdraws to regroup the clan. Itachi, wounded and hollow-eyed, vanishes into the wider chaos with Sasuke pulled into the gravity of his next terrible decision. Ren feels that thread move and lets it go. Some endings are still ripening. Night falls over a Konoha that no longer resembles the village that woke this morning. The old elders are dead. Danzō is dead. The Uchiha are in open revolt, but not exterminated. Foreign forces have been broken outside the walls. Civilian fear has reached a point where people no longer know which name to pray for. And Ren, standing on a ridge of fractured earth above the routed coalition, looks back toward the village and understands that the next stage has already begun. This is no longer about preventing the massacre. It is about deciding what replaces Konoha now that the old order has failed at every level and the world has seen a new kind of power standing where the Hokage should have been. And as retreating armies drag their wounded into the dark, another presence finally arrives at the edge of the battlefield, ancient and vast enough to make even this ruined night feel like a prelude. Hashirama Senju has entered the story again, and the age of ordinary shinobi politics is about to end. He does not arrive like a man. He arrives like memory forcing itself back into the world. The first thing people feel is not chakra in the normal sense. It is presence layered with history, a weight so old and immense that even Konoha's ruined streets seem to recognize it before the shinobi do. Trees at the edge of the broken valley shift in a strange living rhythm. Natural energy stirs. Surviving scouts, foreign and leaf alike, look toward the forest line with the same stunned uncertainty because only one name in the entire era fits what is approaching: Hashirama. By the time his form becomes visible under the night sky, the rumor has already outrun sight. Konoha reacts in broken pieces. Some call it impossible. Some call it Ito Tensei. Some refuse to call it anything because if the first Hokage has truly returned on a night when the third is dead, the Uchiha are in revolt and foreign armies have just been shattered outside the walls. Then history has stopped behaving like history. It has become judgment. Ren watches the figures step into full view and feels something rare touch him, not fear. Interest sharpened by recognition. Because Hashirama is not merely legendary in the way Hiruzen once was or Minato became after death. Hashirama is one of the few beings in this world whose existence changes the emotional chemistry of battle on sight. He is a founding myth with flesh. A man whose name was used to build Konoha's moral center and justify its authority for generations. Now that same founder is walking into a village governed by the consequences of everything built after him. And he sees all of it at once. The ruined valley, the routed coalition, the shattered administrative district in the distance. Smoke over Konoha. The Uchiha insignia still active in armed formations. The civilians hiding instead of celebrating. The feeling of the village's political spine having already been broken before he arrived. His face changes, not into rage, into grief. That grief lands harder than anger could have. Because Hashirama is not just looking at destruction. He is looking at proof that his dream turned into machinery capable of producing this exact night. He understands enough immediately. The Uchiha are not dead. The old leadership is. Foreign villages were opportunistic. Konoha is no longer united behind a Hokage. And standing at the center of the external bloodshed is a young Uchiha whose power feels so catastrophically wrong to the old shinobi scale that even Hashirama's first reaction is silence. Ren breaks it. "You came late," he says. There is no reverence in the words. No founder worship. No inherited awe. Hashirama studies him and answers with a calm that still carries command. "And yet, I came before the end." That line travels farther than either of them intended. Shinobi on both sides hear it. Some feel relief because if the first Hokage is here, maybe the village still has a center. Others feel dread because if even Hashirama is only arriving before the end, then maybe the end is still very much on schedule. Behind Hashirama, the rest of the impossible arrives. Tobirama's chakra feels colder, sharper, instantly more suspicious. He reads the battlefield like a strategist searching for structural weaknesses, and the moment his eyes land on armed Uchiha still standing in organized formations, his expression hardens into something close to old reflex. Beside him, Hiruzen has returned through Ito Tensei as a grim parody of the authority that died on the rooftop, another impossible contradiction for the night to absorb. And farther back, Tsunade's presence crashes into the scene with hot fury, disbelief, and the kind of personal pain that makes political catastrophe feel newly intimate. The dead Hokage have returned to a village that no longer believes in their narrative. That is the true beginning of the next phase. Inside Konoha, word spreads like electricity. The first, second, and third are back. Tsunade is here. The Uchiha are not fully in control. The village is not fully lost. What that means in practical terms is almost impossible for anyone to define, but emotionally it halts total collapse. A new center has appeared, even if that center is made of the resurrected dead and a granddaughter who never wanted this inheritance back under these conditions. Ren steps down from the ridge and returns toward the village with no attempt to flee or hide. Again, that choice matters. If he disappeared into the district now, he could preserve strength, force Hashirama and the others to move into more hostile ground, and drag the conflict out through civil terrain. That would be tactically sound. He does not do it because this next confrontation is about legitimacy as much as force. Konoha has to see the strongest Uchiha in the village meet its founders without flinching. The world has to understand that this is not a rebellion begging for recognition. It is a new order forcing the old one to justify itself. By the time he reaches the broken core of the village again, the battlefield has widened into something stranger than a war zone. Uchiha hold sections of the administration routes. Clan compounds remain barricaded and alert. Civilians watch through cracks, windows, rooftop gaps, every angle from which terror and curiosity can share the same breath. The bodies of Hiruzen's era are still present in memory, if not all in sight. Smoke makes everything look half-finished. And at the center of the square of ruins, the dead Hokage and Tsunade face the clan that history failed. Fugaku comes forward to stand on Ren's left. He is bloodied, exhausted, and somehow more dangerous now than he was at the start of the day because all illusion has been stripped from him. He no longer carries himself like a clan leader petitioning for dignity. He carries himself like the head of a people who were almost erased and chose to answer with open force. Around him, the Uchiha gather in disciplined ranks, not rabble, not a panicked mob. Sharingan eyes burn in the low light. Some mourn, some rage. Most simply stand with the calm of men and women who know retreat now means extermination later. The district has crossed beyond return. Hashirama looks from Fugaku to Ren, then out over the clan and the village around them. "What happened here?" he asks. It sounds almost absurd after everything that has occurred, but the question is not stupidity. It is moral inventory. He is asking what had to be broken for Konoha to become this. Several people could answer. Hiruzen tries first. Even as an Edo Tensei construct, some habits refuse to die. He begins shaping the story toward coup, instability, Danzō's excesses, rising clan danger, the need for containment, the tragedy of mutual escalation. He speaks like a man still trying to preserve a usable version of his own memory. Ren cuts through him before the speech can fully stand. "You built a village that let fear become policy," he says. "Then you waited until policy became murder. No flourish, no shout. Just the accusation stripped down to the bone." Tobirama's eyes narrow at once. Tsunade's jaw tightens. Hashirama does not answer immediately. That silence matters more than any denial. He is searching the battlefield for evidence. The accusation is unfair. The battlefield gives him none. Tsunade asks the next question because, unlike the older men, she has no interest in hiding behind abstraction. Did they plan to wipe out the clan? Nobody answers quickly. That is answer enough too. The surviving shinobi around the square shift uncomfortably. A and BU avoid one another's eyes. Some civilians hear enough to begin understanding the shape of the lie they lived inside. The truth, once spoken, has a way of forcing everyone nearby to decide whether they can still bear pretending they did not smell it before. Fugaku finally answers, "Yes." The single word lands with crushing clarity. He does not embellish. He does not beg. He simply states the fact as clan head and as father of a village that spent years teaching his children. They were tolerated only until convenient otherwise. That is when Tsunade turns on Hiruzen with genuine fury. She does not care that he is dead. She does not care that he was once her teacher or the village's elder. She sees the bodies this night left behind, the structures already shattered, and understands immediately that none of it happened in one evening. This was cultivated, managed, deferred, allowed. "You knew," she says. Hiruzen tries to explain complexity. That is exactly the wrong instinct. Tsunade's disgust becomes physical. "You knew." There is no answer good enough for that repetition. Tobirama speaks then, and the air changes again. Of all the resurrected, he is the one most inclined to view the Uchiha problem as structurally inevitable. His suspicion of the clan was never hidden in life, and death has not softened him. He looks at the armed district, the dead elders, the murdered third, and the revolt standing in front of him and sees confirmation rushing to shake his hand. "This is why institutions exist," he says coldly. "To act before fear becomes collapse." Ren almost smiles. Because Tobirama, more than anyone here, represents the original architecture of Konoha's mistrust. The polished intelligence, the efficiency, the confidence that if a population contains enough dangerous possibility, preemptive control is not oppression but prudence. Men like Tobirama always sound rational right up to the moment their logic begins filling graves. "You built the cage," Ren says. "Then you blame the animal for biting the bars." That lands. Even Tobirama feels it, not as emotional persuasion but as narrative inversion. The village founder who spent his life defining the Uchiha as risk is being told to look at the village that inherited his design and account for what that design became. Hashirama raises a hand before the exchange can turn immediately to blood. His authority still means something to enough people here that the moment holds. "We settle this now," he says. "No more clan slaughter, no more hidden orders. No more old men deciding in darkness who lives." It is a good line. It is also late. Ren knows it, Fugaku knows it, Tsunade knows it, even Hashirama knows it while speaking. But the line still has power because it comes from the one man in Konoha's entire dead history whose moral weight can still momentarily pause the rush toward full collapse. Then, Hiruzen ruins the pause by speaking again. His voice turns toward order, succession, stabilization, village continuity. Not because he is wrong that Konoha needs those things, but because he still cannot stop framing catastrophe as an administrative problem first. The Uchiha hear it and understand immediately. Even now, even after death and resurrection, the man is still prioritizing the institution that nearly killed them. That is when Ren decides the next move. He does not attack Hashirama, he attacks the concept of inherited authority itself. Conqueror's haki erupts outward, wide this time, not aimed for surgical disruption but for domination on a scale Konoha has never physically experienced. The pressure crashes through the square and up the surrounding streets like a storm front made of superiority. Chonin drop instantly, Jonin grind teeth and struggle to stay upright. Civilians collapse in homes nearby, unconscious before they understand why. Even elite shinobi and clan heads beyond the immediate scene feel the weight descend and know that the center of power has just shifted again. Hashirama remains standing, so does Tobirama, so does Tsunade, and though Hiruzen survives it, though the sight of the village bending under Ren's will turns whatever remains of his pride into something uglier and quieter. The message is absolute. This is no longer a negotiation between a wounded clan and a wounded institution. This is a contest over who has the right to impose reality on everyone else. Hashirama's chakra rises in answer. Wood releases tears from the broken square and climbs into the air in titanic forms, roots and trunks knotting together into living fortifications. It does not look like ninjutsu. It looks like nature itself obeying a person. Civilians watching from a distance weep in relief. That old instinct kicks in immediately. The first Hokage is here. The founder is protecting us. The tree god has returned. Ren launches forward before that emotional momentum can solidify. Their first collision detonates over the center of Konoha with a force that makes every other fight of the night feel like an argument compared to a verdict. Hashirama's wood dragon descends. Ren meets it with a quake-backed punch that fractures the construct along its spine and sends splintered chakra wood raining over 3 streets. Hashirama follows with gates, roots, branches the size of towers. Ren breaks, sidesteps, shatters, and tunnels through them in bursts of impossible close-range violence. The village watches its founder fight a boy from the clan it nearly exterminated, and for the first time a terrible question enters the public mind. What if the founder loses? That question spreads faster than any flame. Tobirama almost intervenes, but Tsunade stops him for one crucial beat, not out of trust in Ren, not even out of certainty in Hashirama, but because she sees the broader truth faster than he does. If the second enters now against the Uchiha, the entire symbolic structure of the battle collapses into old prejudice, reenacting itself. Hashirama has to face this as founder first. If he cannot bear that weight alone, then Konoha deserves what follows. The fight climbs upward. Hashirama rises atop wood constructs that burst from the square into towering forms. Ren air steps to meet him, one impossible motion answering another. Muraku Mogiri flashes and carves through branch networks thick as buildings. Tremors strike split giant trunks from within. Hashirama heals. Ren endures. Every exchange rewrites nearby terrain. Every miss still ruins stone, tile, earth, or wall. The city center becomes a ring of ruin, surrounding a battle far larger than streets were built to host. Mid-roll. Because this is where the legend of Konoha's founder stops protecting the village emotionally and starts being tested by the reality standing in front of him. Hashirama changes approach. He stops fighting like a rescuer and starts fighting like the man who once subdued tailed beasts barehanded. Sage power floods him. The atmosphere thickens with living force. His wood release expands into something almost divine, 1,000 armed avatar rising above the broken skyline, each wooden limb carrying the weight of old victory and old inevitability. Gasps travel through the village. Some people fall to their knees from awe alone. Ren looks up and does not flinch. That refusal is more important than the counter that follows. Because Konoha needs to see it, the clans need to see it. The resurrected Hokage need to see it. The giant symbols of the past no longer have the automatic right to obedience. If they want the future, they have to seize it from the living. Ren answers with his own escalation. Black armament deepens over him. Conqueror's haki threads through his movements like a crown made violent. The eternal Mangekyo burns bright. And then Susanoo rises around him. Not green like Shisui's or skeletal in the uncertain early sense, but vast, armored, and monstrous. A dark war. God shaped by a man who never treated power as sacred enough to fear touching all of it at once. The square beneath him groans. The whole village sees it. Fugaku's face hardens with grim recognition. Itachi, wounded and hidden along the edge of the larger chaos, feels the scale of his own irrelevance in the presence of what Ren has become. Sasuke stares with a child's terror and fascination. Naruto, somewhere farther off in the damaged village, senses the pressure without understanding anything except that the world is being decided by monsters and he is still too small to name them. Hashirama's great wooden avatar and Ren's Susanoo collide over Konoha. The impact is biblical. Wood fist slam. Susanoo blade answers. Tremor cracks split through the contact points in spider across the giant construct. Whole arms tear loose. Buildings below are flattened by falling fragments and shockwaves. Hashirama regrows one side faster than most men can think. Ren carves through the regrowth before it can fully stabilize. The sight is too large for normal fear. It becomes cosmological. A war of gods above the village that ordinary shinobi were still pretending they governed an hour ago. And Ren gains ground, not immediately, not cleanly, but visibly. That is what breaks people. Hashirama is still one of the greatest beings ever born into this world, but he is fighting with memory, morality, and the burden of trying not to erase the village he came to save. Ren fights with fewer restraints and a body built around collision. Every time Hashirama chooses preservation over annihilation, Ren gains space. Every time he gains space, his own layered power compounds the advantage. Haki, quake, blade, eyes, body. Everything in him is built to turn small openings into catastrophic results. At last he finds one. Hashirama commits to a binding surge, roots and colossal hands trying to trap Susanoo's center for a decisive suppression. Ren lets the cage begin closing. Then he drives Murakamogiri, quake-charged and haki-coated, through the converging mass and into the heartline of the avatar. The world seems to split vertically. The giant wooden construct cracks down its core. One side peels away. The force of the rupture rolls outward through Konoha in a pressure wave that bursts windows and drives shinobi flat. Hashirama is thrown free from the collapsing upper section, lands, regains balance, and looks up just in time to see Ren's Susanoo towering over the battlefield like the end of an argument. Silence follows, not complete silence. Fires still crackle. People still cry. Distant combat still sputters in leftover corners. But the emotional center of the village goes silent. The founder has been beaten back in open view. Hashirama does not charge again. He stands in the ruins of his own technique, breathing, thinking, and finally understanding the full ugliness of the hour. Konoha cannot be restored to what it was, because what it was produced, this. The Uchiha cannot be put back into the district and told to trust again. The founders cannot descend from memory and command obedience by name alone. That age is over. Ren lowers Susanoo just enough to speak without hiding in it. I'm not destroying Konoha tonight, he says. I'm ending the version that deserved to die. No one in the square has a clean answer to that. Even Hashirama, who should reject it on instinct, finds himself looking at Hiruzen, at the dead elders, at the armed Uchiha, who would have been slaughtered in secret if not for open revolt. And realizing that the sentence is not nihilism, it is indictment. The next step comes from Tsunade. She walks into the center of the broken square and claims the only position left that can hold the village without pretending the old order was salvageable. She does not ask permission, she does not wait for ceremony. She stands amid founders, corpses, rebels, and civilians, and announces what everyone else is too stunned to frame. The Third's era is over, she says. Root is finished. The extermination order dies here. Any shinobi who carries it out from this moment on is my enemy. The words crash through the village like a second restoration, but this one feels honest because it comes after visible rot, not before it. Then she looks at Fugaku. The clan stands down from expansion beyond its district in current positions. In return, no action is taken against Uchiha civilians, no secret arrests, no night operations, no disappearance orders. Fugaku looks to Ren. That glance alone tells the village what it needed to know. The clan head still leads, but the gravity has shifted. Ren is the power behind whether this becomes ceasefire or renewed slaughter. Ren considers the terms and accepts, not out of trust, but because the battlefield has already yielded the more important result. The old order is dead. The world saw it die. Everything from here forward will happen under that fact. So the ceasefire forms. Uneasy, armed, conditional, but real. Foreign scouts witnessing the edge of this new arrangement retreat with even worse news than before. Konoha did not collapse. It transformed under fire. The Uchiha were not exterminated. They became central. The founders returned and did not simply restore the old chain. A new regime is forming, and at its center stands a monster strong enough to force the shape of peace. By dawn, Tsunade is effectively the fifth Hokage, though nothing about the transition resembles ceremony. Root compounds are being torn open. Danzō's surviving networks are hunted down. Hiruzen's public memory is already splitting into heroism, shame, and accusation depending on who speaks. Homura and Koharu are gone. The district barriers around the Uchiha are being reconsidered in real time. The village has not healed. It has only survived its own autopsy. Hashirama remains long enough to see the first fragile pieces of the new order laid down. He says little. There is no founder's speech grand enough to redeem what he now understands he helped set in motion. Before the Edo pole eventually takes him, he looks over the village, and the young men who nearly destroyed it for opposite reasons and seems older than death should allow. Tobirama leaves the scene colder, but quieter. Even he has seen too much tonight to pretend preemptive mistrust came without cost. He is not converted. Men like him rarely are. But some small certainty has cracked. And Ren, once the storm begins settling into armed peace, walks alone to the edge of the village where the valley still bears the scar of his battle with the coalition. There he raises one hand and drives power into the earth. Not to shatter this time, but to force growth. Under Hashirama's inherited body and his own impossible strength, the ruined edge of the battlefield begins changing. New trees rise where the earth was split. Green spreads over scar tissue. It is not restoration. It is a marker. Proof that destruction and creation now belong to the same hand. From the ridge, he looks back at Konoha and sees a village that will never again be what it was yesterday. That should be the end of the war. Instead, it is only the end of the first one. Because far from the village, in shadows that did not commit fully to the night's chaos, another group has been watching the collapse, the ceasefire, and the birth of this new order with growing interest. The Akatsuki no longer see Konoha as merely the leaf. They see it as a battlefield where monsters are gathering, bloodlines are destabilizing, and tailed beasts may become easier to claim amid political transition. And at the center of that calculation, one name begins to matter above all others. Pain is coming. It begins far from Konoha, in rain that never sounds clean. Amagakure has always felt like a wound that learned how to stand upright. Metal towers, wet concrete, dripping cables, alleys where water carries secrets better than blood. In the highest dark chambers, Nagato receives the reports one after another, and each one sharpens his silence. The third Hokage is dead. Danzō is dead. Homura and Koharu are dead. The Uchiha are not erased. The first and second appeared and did not restore the old order. Tsunade now stands in a Hokage's position. Foreign forces probed and were shattered. And at the center of all of it is one name that does not fit comfortably into any existing intelligence frame. Uchiha Ren. Konan studies the paper in her hand a little longer before setting it down. The rain beyond the tower windows hammers the glass with a rhythm that never changes. But the world outside has changed anyway. She knows that look on Nagato's face. It is the look he wears when a political event stops being political and starts becoming structural. Konoha is no longer simply the strongest great village. It is now unstable in a way that creates opportunity and danger at the same time. For Obito, hidden behind his own masks and longer intentions, the reports create a different kind of anger. He remembers the white-masked figure from the Nine Tails night. He remembers the humiliation of a plan slipping under a force he had not accounted for. Now that same force has survived civil war, killed Konoha's old spine, and stood against Hashirama himself. That is not a loose variable anymore. It is a future collision guaranteed by the shape of the era. Zetsu understands the problem most quietly of all. Ren is becoming the sort of anomaly that bends larger plans around his existence. Men like that cannot be ignored. They must be measured, delayed, redirected, or consumed before they become impossible. Nagato does not speak for a long time. Then he says the one sentence that matters. Konoha has forgotten pain. Konan turns to him. She knows what he means. The village survived civil war and political collapse without being fully broken. It found a new center before the old ashes cooled. The Uchiha, rather than being buried, now stand armed inside a restructured order. That is not a village that has learned anything. That is a village that may start believing survival proves righteousness. Nagato has never tolerated that belief. His own body remains a prison of damage and willpower. His true frame is thin, exhausted, and permanently half-devoured by the burden of the Rinnegan. But through the 6 paths of pain, that broken body still projects judgment across nations. To him, pain is not cruelty. It is education forced onto those who only change when suffering reaches the scale of revelation. Konoha, in his view, now requires a lesson large enough to cut through victory, grief, reform, and every new lie the village might tell itself about being reborn. The order goes out quietly. Akatsuki assets begin shifting. Intelligence routes change. Observation around Fire Country tightens. The goal is not full war, not yet. The goal is penetration, evaluation, and if possible, extraction. The Nine Tails remains where it always needed to be. Naruto still lives. The village around him is damaged, distracted, politically restructured, and now centered around a power arrangement no one fully trusts. That is exactly the sort of condition Nagato prefers. Fractured systems are easier to enter. Traumatized people are easier to overwhelm. Back in Konoha, dawns begin arriving with unnatural discipline. The ceasefire holds, but nobody mistakes it for peace. The Uchiha district is no longer isolated in the old way. Barriers are relaxed. Surveillance patterns are changing. Root facilities are being dismantled one by one under Tsunade's authority, and every time another underground chamber is opened, another layer of the old order rots in public. Records surface, names surface, quiet operations, disappearances, experimental holdings, dossiers on clans, children, dissidents, and useful monsters. Konoha is being forced to look at its own underbelly without the comfort of pretending it was only Danzō acting alone. Tsunade does not permit that comfort. That becomes one of the reasons the village begins obeying her faster than anyone expected. She rules from exhaustion and fury rather than ceremony. That helps. There is no polished transition speech, no false healing rhetoric. She is too angry for performance and too practical to wait for cleaner conditions. Hospitals receive priority, civilian reconstruction begins immediately, ANBU command is purged and rebuilt. Any shinobi tied directly to extermination planning or root atrocities is removed, imprisoned, or washed with open hostility. It is a brutal stabilization, but brutal honesty turns out to be more effective than Hiruzen's soft evasions ever were. The hardest part is the Uchiha question, because the village still does not know how to look at them without old fear trying to reassert itself. Fugaku handles his side with discipline that surprises many outside the clan. He could press harder. He could use the leverage of Ren's power and the village's current weakness to fully dominate central command, demand mass purges, seize more territory, perhaps even openly replace the Hokage seat with clan rule in all but name. He does not. The near extermination of his people has burned excess illusion out of him, but it has also clarified something else. A people who have just escaped genocide cannot afford to immediately become occupiers unless they are prepared to kill everyone who objects. Fugaku has no interest in leading his clan into endless civil enforcement, so the Uchiha consolidate rather than expand. They hold their people together. They secure lines of response. They re-enter village administration visibly, not meekly, but not as conquerors either. Some civilians hate it. Some are relieved by the clarity. Many simply do not know what to feel anymore. Itachi does not appear publicly. That absence becomes its own rumor. Some say he fled. Some say he is held. Some say he serves Tsunade in secret. Some say Ren spared him for reasons no one understands. The truth is harsher and quieter. Itachi exists in the edges now, wounded in body and hollowed by choice, unable to fully return to the clan and not welcome as a clean symbol of the village either. Sasuke clings to him emotionally even while the bond has been poisoned beyond anything children should have to name. Their household becomes one more small war hidden inside the larger one. Ren does not involve himself there. He is useful to Tsunade in a way no one likes admitting aloud. He does not wear office. He does not sit in council for long stretches. He does not posture for legitimacy. But every major discussion in the rebuilt center bends around one unspoken fact. If Ren rejects the arrangement may not survive. That makes him indispensable and dangerous in equal measure. Tsunade deals with that truth the only way it can be dealt with. Directly. Their conversations are sharp from the start. She does not flatter him. He does not kneel to her title. The result is the closest thing to honesty Konoha has seen at its highest level in years. "You're not Hokage," she tells him once, in the half-repaired office that still carries traces of old smoke. "I know. You're also the reason people think this village can survive another invasion." That sounds like your problem. Tsunade almost smiles at that, but not quite. It becomes yours when they bring the next one to our gates. She understands him better than Hiruzen ever could have, because she does not mistake control for trust. She does not need Ren to believe in the village. She only needs the current alignment of interests to hold long enough for Konoha to stabilize under new terms. That is a narrower and more realistic kind of politics, which is why it works at all. Naruto keeps growing in the background of all this like a question. The village still has not answered. He is louder now, more physical. More desperate in the way neglected children often become when they realize attention can be extracted through irritation if not affection. The political shift around him changes some things. Not enough. Civilians are still cold. Whispers still follow him. But the total atmosphere of Konoha has changed just enough that he no longer feels like the village's only acceptable target for displaced fear. The Uchiha are no longer contained devils. The elders are exposed. Root is exposed. Authority itself has become morally complicated in public. That helps Naruto in small ways nobody celebrates. Aruka reaches him sooner and more sincerely. Tuchi's kindness stands out more. A few shinobi who might have ignored him before now look twice, not because they suddenly become good, but because the village has already learned what happens when it lets resentment harden into policy around a child. Even hypocrisy can create room for survival. Ren observes Naruto from a distance several times during these months, enough to confirm what he already suspected. The boy remains chaotic, undertrained, starved for acknowledgement, and impossible to reduce to the role Konoha built for him. The Nine-Tails' container is still becoming himself despite everything around him trying to make him become only the burden inside him. That matters. It matters even more when the first Akatsuki infiltrators touch the edge of the village and Ren senses them before most of Konoha knows to look. The pressure is wrong, not loud, not clumsy, just wrong. Foreign hostility usually feels like ambition, greed, opportunism, fear. This feels colder, purpose-built. The kind of hostility that has been ideologically sharpened until even patience feels like a weapon. He catches the first team near an outer route after dark. They are not elite enough to matter on their own, but they are disciplined enough to prove a larger structure behind them. They die fast, yet not before confirming the shape of the threat. Akatsuki has begun sounding Konoha's boundaries. Tsunade believes him immediately because she is not stupid enough to wait for the second corpse before trusting the first warning. Security around Naruto changes. Jiraiya is pulled closer to the village's internal orbit rather than left drifting around its outer margins. Uchiha and village response teams begin sharing intelligence in ways that would have been unthinkable under the old regime. The new Konoha is still fragile, but it is at least capable of adapting without first arguing about whether adaptation is politically convenient. Mid-roll, because the next attack is where Konoha learns the difference between surviving civil war and surviving an idea like pain. Jiraiya goes out to investigate and does not return with answers anyone can use in time. That is how Nagato prefers it. He respects the old Sannin enough to treat him as a real obstacle, and real obstacles are removed before the main lesson begins. The confrontation in rain and concrete belongs mostly to another story, but its consequence reaches Konoha like a nerve being cut. The message is simple. One of the village's greatest surviving legends has stepped into the Akatsuki shadow and not come back whole. When the true assault begins, it does not start with drums or armies. It starts with 6 bodies approaching Konoha in calm formation. The sky is heavy. The village is busy trying to be normal in the wake of everything it has already endured. Merchants speak. Children run. Reconstruction teams move lumber and stone. Civilians complain about shortages, politics, clan shifts, old grievances, new rumors. Life makes its first mistake. It assumes continued existence means safety. Then the sensory teams feel the Rinnegan and go pale. The alarm spreads faster than sound. By the time the 6 paths of pain step fully into range, Konoha is mobilizing. But the mobilization is incomplete because nobody alive in the village has ever faced this exact thing before. Tsunade moves instantly, issuing layered defense orders and civilian evacuation routes. Fugaku secures the Uchiha sectors and diverts fighters toward central lines. A and B remnants scramble under the new chain of command. Jonin take rooftops. The whole village braces. Pain keeps walking. There is no rage in the motion. That makes it worse. This is not a man attacking in fury. This is doctrine arriving. The first exchanges are brutal. Animal summons rip through response lines. Missiles tear apart newly repaired streets. Shinra Tensei throws defenders and buildings alike aside in sickening arcs. Konoha has survived monsters before, but Pain does not feel like a monster in the old-tailed beast sense. He feels like systematic ruin. Like an enemy built specifically to demonstrate that organized villages are only temporary arrangements waiting to be scattered. Tsunade becomes the village's pulse almost immediately. Katsuyu spreads. Medical channels open. Battlefield triage begins at scale. She cannot personally crush Pain, but she can make Konoha harder to kill all at once, and that matters more in the first stage than heroics. The 5th Hokage proves her worth not through one dramatic clash, but by refusing to let the village die in the order Pain expects. The Uchiha fight differently now than they would have under Hiruzen. They do not wait for permission to matter. Sharingan teams read patterns faster than most. Fugaku coordinates urban kill angles with cold efficiency. Fire and genjutsu disrupt summon routes. For the first time in Konoha's modern history, village defenders and Uchiha forces are acting as one combat organism rather than suspicious neighbors forced into temporary cooperation. Pain notices. He says nothing. But the adaptation changes his own calculations. Ren arrives at the battlefield center only after observing enough to understand that this is not a probing strike. It is the lesson itself. He sees the cratered streets, the fleeing civilians, Tsunade bleeding chakra through Katsuyu's network. Uchiha teams and village jonin dying on the same lines. The diva path, standing at the center of this wreckage with the composure of a god explaining inevitability through violence. And Ren understands at once what Nagato is trying to do. This is not only about Naruto, it is not only about tailed beasts, it is about narrative. Pain is trying to break Konoha after its self-reinvention, trying to prove that reform, ceasefire, new leadership, all of it still collapses before sufficient force and sufficient suffering. He is trying to turn Konoha's fresh claim to survival into another lesson about the futility of systems. That ambition irritates Ren more than the destruction itself. He lands in the middle of a ruined avenue with enough force to crack the street and finally make the diva path stop walking. The whole village feels the pause. Pain studies him with those impossible eyes and speaks as if the sentence was waiting anyway. So you're the one. Ren looks at the wreckage around them. You talk too much for a corpse. That line reaches farther than either of them intends. Some defenders laugh once, harshly, because tension needs a fracture. Others only stare. They know the scale of what is happening now. The village's strongest independent force has stepped in. Whatever happens next will decide more than this battle. The diva path lifts a hand. Shinra Tensei crashes down the avenue. The wave of repulsive force obliterates everything in front of it. Rubble becomes shrapnel. Walls rip loose. Dust turns instantly into a storm. Ren meets it head-on, black armament hardening over his frame, feet carving trenches through broken stone as the pressure tries to fling him through 3 buildings at once. He does not fully stop it. Nobody should. But he bleeds its momentum, absorbs enough of the physics to keep the avenue from becoming one more burial line, and then launches through the fading force before the diva path can fully reset. The counterstrike is vicious. Ren's fist, layered with hockey and tremor force, slams into the path hard enough to fracture the air and send the body skipping across the destroyed street like a thrown weapon. The sight stuns everyone nearby because it does not feel like ninjutsu. It feels like someone punching theology in the mouth. Pain recovers instantly through the linked network. The other paths converge. Absorption, missiles, summons, soul-hunting reach, battlefield manipulation. The 6-body system closes around Ren with the kind of coordination only shared vision can create. He answers by making coordination expensive. Observation. Haki reads their angles before they complete. Murakumogiri comes out in a great black arm sweep and carves through a summon and the broken remains of a wall in the same motion. Conqueror's Haki hammers the lesser battlefield around him. Not enough to flatten the paths, but enough to drop compromised enemies and clear the movement space. Pain once crowded. A quake strike caves the Asura path through the torso and into the street beneath it. Another hit breaks the summoner's footing and ruins a line of attack before it properly forms. Pain adjusts. That is what makes him worthy of the reputation. He is not shocked for long. He begins rotating the bodies with more caution, relying on layered openings, trying to separate Ren from the village rather than overpower him immediately. If Ren becomes the fixed point of Konoha's defense, then the correct solution is not frontal ego. It is structural removal. The diva path rises above the avenue and speaks like finality. Konoha, feel the pain. The sky itself seems to recoil. Tsunade knows what is coming a second before the rest and screams the evacuation order anyway, not because it will save everyone, but because some lives are always hidden inside 1 second's warning. Kotsuyu stretches farther. Shields, medics, routes, please. Every defender with any mobility moves. Shinra Tensei descends on the village at catastrophic scale. This is the attack meant to erase the least ability to call itself a place. The force blooms outward in a sphere so immense it stops looking like a technique and starts looking like a law being imposed. Buildings tear free from foundations, towers split, streets vanish. Whole blocks lift and then are driven outward in ruin. The village gasps as one body under a god's hand, and then the hand slips. Because Ren hits it at the center, he does not negate the entire attack. Even he cannot simply deny all of that force as though it were smoke. But he strikes into its heart with everything at once. Body, quake, Haki, refusal. And the result is enough to warp the outcome. The expanding devastation loses clean symmetry. The pressure sphere breaks unevenly. One side of the village still suffers terribly, but the total annihilation, pain intended, stutters around the point where Ren's countershock ruptures the wave from within. The visual is impossible. Air splitting inside an invisible god force. Shock patterns crashing into one another above Konoha. The village not saved cleanly, but denied complete erasure by a man too stubborn and too monstrous to permit anyone else full narrative control over this battlefield. Pain lands hard after the recoil. For the first time, the diva path's expression shifts. Not fear, not exactly. Recognition. Nagato, far away in the hidden chamber, feels the feedback and understands the same thing. Uchiha Ren is not just another defender, Not just another prodigy Konoha happened to produce, he is the kind of counterweight that can deform lessons. A man whose existence makes ideological theater unreliable because he physically refuses the shape of the sermon. That makes him dangerous in a way Naruto is not yet dangerous. But Naruto still matters, and pain does not abandon purpose simply because the battlefield changed. The six paths begin their final adaptation of the engagement, one built not purely around destruction now, but around extraction under pressure. Naruto must still be found, fixed, and taken if possible. Konoha must still bleed enough to remember. Ren, if he cannot be killed cleanly, may need to be delayed instead. Ren senses the shift and understands what it means immediately. This battle does not end here. Not cleanly, not finally. If he overcommits to crushing Pain's bodies in the street, Nagato may still create the opening needed elsewhere. If he protects Naruto openly now, he reveals too much too soon. If he lets Pain disengage with information and momentum, Akatsuki returns later under worse conditions. Every path forward preserves danger. That is exactly why the ending must remain unfinished. He destroys two more paths before the first withdrawal line completes. One he caves in with a quake-backed elbow that turns the body into broken machinery. Another he bisects with Murakumogiri in a strike so heavy the avenue beneath it splits again. The remaining paths retreat in controlled disorder, not routed, not victorious, simply recalculating with cold efficiency. The Diva path pauses at the edge of the ruined district and looks back once. Through those eyes, Nagato speaks to the village, to Ren, to Tsunade, to every survivor trying to decide whether they have just won or merely interrupted something worse. You survive because your pain is still incomplete. Then the paths go. Not gone forever, not defeated in the old satisfying sense. Withdrawn, carrying data, damage, and a revised understanding of Konoha's new center of gravity. The silence after is worse than cheering would have been. There's no victory cry in the village. Too many are wounded. Too much is broken again. The streets are full of dust, blood, collapsed homes, medics screaming for hands and chakra and time. Tsunade remains upright only because she refuses to fall before the work stabilizes. Fugaku is already redirecting Uchiha and police forces into joint rescue lines. Civilians crawl from rubble. Children cry for parents who may or may not answer. Konoha has survived, yes, but survival no longer feels clean enough to celebrate. Ren stands in the middle of the broken avenue, breathing steadily, looking toward the direction Pain left. Naruto is still here. Akatsuki is still moving. Obito is still in the dark. Zetsu is still buried in larger plans. The village has endured civil war, founder judgment, foreign probing, and now Pain's first great strike. Each survival has cost something. Each new order has been born under pressure rather than peace. And every enemy worth naming has now adjusted their expectations around one central truth. Konoha is no longer merely a village. It is a fault line where monsters, ideals, bloodlines, and unfinished histories keep colliding without resolution. As the sun begins sinking through smoke over the leaf one more time, Tsunade orders reconstruction again, because that is what leaders do when endings refuse to arrive. Fugaku gathers the clan and keeps them standing. Sasuke watches a brother he cannot understand from farther away than family should ever feel. Naruto, bruised and still too young for the scale moving around him, stares at the ruined horizon with the instinctive certainty that all of this will eventually reach him too. And Ren, the boy who once fought on Hokage Rock so the village would finally notice his existence, looks over the damage and sees no peace waiting at the far side of any of it, only the next convergence, the next lesson, the next enemy arrogant enough to believe they can shape this age without first going through him. Konoha lives. That is all anyone can honestly say. For now, that is enough to keep the world from ending. It is nowhere near enough to stop it from trying again.